Welcome to God is Open. I'm your host, Christopher Fisher. Today on God is Open, we are going to be doing Responding to the Experts, Part 2. Let's pull this guy up here. It's this guy, Jonathan Moorhead. He's our quote-unquote expert that we're going to be responding to today. And so, he's a Calvinist. Naturally, he's a Calvinist. He wrote a book on the trial of the century about Servetus and John Calvin. And naturally, he is absolutely terrible. And sometimes it kind of makes me mad. It makes my blood boil a little bit how much he lies, he misrepresents, he does lies of omission. He does this framing that's entirely disingenuous. For example, he complains about Servetus being abusive towards Calvin at a trial, which Calvin is, or when Servetus is on trial for his life, and his accuser is John Calvin. And yeah, it makes sense that Servetus is being abusive towards Calvin. It makes sense. But he forgets to mention, lie of omission, how abusive Calvin is, who has the whole Geneva government behind him, who has the people on his side, who is living in freedom, not chained up. How abusive Calvin is towards Servetus in those same conditions. He just forgets about that part. And so it's very selective, and his framing is very disingenuous. Yeah, okay, if you're on trial for your life and your accuser's right there, you might be using bad words towards this person trying to kill you. Just maybe. John Calvin he was not in the same position. John Calvin's just bad-natured. And this Calvinist apologist just downplays Calvin's personality. Calvin cries out as he strikes you. Yeah, this is a common Calvinist thing. It's like, I'm a victim. And John Calvin does that all the time. It's like, oh, I'm so a victim. As he's striking out, he's trying to destroy people. He's censoring people. He's getting people fired. He's reaching out, trying to destroy people's reputation, trying to get them, destroy their livelihoods. And this is what's going on. All right, so we're going to kick this off, but I'm going to start with a quote that I found that was interesting. And this is from 1650. It's from D. Raveri. And so this is actually coming from the footnotes of Balzac's Life of Calvin. Now, he was a critic of Calvin, and he wrote a critical review of the life of Calvin, in which he talks about who Calvin was, Calvin's gross personality, his character flaws, and things like that. And the Catholics who preserve this work write these footnotes, and they include very interesting quotes. And one of these just kind of shows that times don't change. They write this. This is the D. Raveri from 1650. There is no Calvinist who does not have a high opinion of himself, who does not think he would lose greatly if he were obliged to exchange himself for another. He imagines that when nature made him, she worked according to the most perfect of her ideas, and persuades himself that his eminence is a coin so rich and precious that it is capable of paying everyone if he were to put it up for auction. And so Calvinists had a reputation in those times for being self-centered, full of themselves, and self-congratulatory, self-righteous, and just very narcissistic. This is just a common thing that we see throughout history. There's another quote that I don't have pulled up right now. I put it on Twitter, but basically it's Rousseau, and he talks about the Calvinist in that they don't take firm stances on anything. They could always tell you what they're against, but they can never tell you what they actually believe. And so those are a couple truisms that ring true throughout history. So Calvinism is on trial today, on trial with the trial of Servetus. When we're talking about these things, again, the history of this doesn't quite matter to me. It doesn't matter. What matters to me is that Calvinists such as John Moorhead are exposing themselves in their terrible character, their lack of integrity, how readily they are going to lie and misrepresent and justify falsely Calvin and Calvin's behavior. And so that's more interesting. So he's implicating himself in the disintegrity of Calvinists in defending John Calvin. That's a little bit more interesting to me. And so we're going to start today by pulling up, Castillo and his death of Servetus. And so in his death of Servetus, one of the lies that these Calvinists do, like John Moorhead, he absolutely lies. He talks about, apocryphal accounts written years later and things like that. No, there's 3 accounts of the death of Servetus. There's one that we have partial fragments of, which I have in my volume 3, which is good. By the way, volume 2 is published. It is just published as of today. Volume 2 is all the letters, all the references in the Calvin opera about Servetus as these letters flow back and forth. I didn't grab all of them because a lot of them are just, that guy's a Servetus follower. That guy's a Servetus follower. They'll just accuse anyone of being a follower of Servetus for any reason. So I'm not translating everything, but it's still like 150,000 words in these letters. And so that is out there for everyone to see. But we're going to go look at Castillo. And this was written in 1553, late 1553. Remember, Servetus is executed in October of 53. This is written by Castillo in the same year, October, November, December, within 3 months that this is circulating. And how does he get this information? He has eyewitnesses that come to him and report the death of Servetus and what happened there. And so, what's our guy's name? Jonathan Moorhead, because he's a liar, he'll say, these apocryphal accounts have Calvin dancing around the funeral pyre. Don't exist. Those accounts of Calvin dancing around the funeral pyre, Jonathan Moorhead made that up. What he's likely referencing is, in this document, in Castillo's account, his eyewitnesses recalled during sentencing, as Servetus is being led away, people saw John Calvin smile. That's what happened. Not that John Calvin was at the fire. John Calvin was not at the actual burning of Servetus, but he smiled. Multiple witnesses report to Castillo as he's led away. Within the 3 months after the death, 2 months really, these reports are circulating from eyewitnesses. And so that's what we're talking about. So in the death of Servetus, he has 5 accusations of John Calvin. And of course, Jonathan Moorhead, I got to keep looking at this guy's name. I do not want to file it in my memory. But he'll tell lies like, this is just the spirit of the age. These things were just common. You expected execution for heresy. Really? How many people in Geneva were executed for heresy, Jonathan? How many? Under Calvin? 1? Servetus? Just 1? It was expected? It was commonplace? No, he's just lying. It was an immediate, massive scandal. And so we'll read the accusations from Castillo. All right. This affair disturbed many pious people and produced a scandal of all scandals, which seemed hardly ever able to be wiped away, for pious people condemned many crimes in that deed. So he lists the 6 complaints against Calvin, and this will be very indicative. This is concurrent with the execution. Right after the execution, it's talking about the general state of affairs. It's a huge scandal. First, because a man was killed at Geneva on account of religion. You should not be executing for thought crimes. And so it's a lot of these complaints when people are saying, what are you guys doing here in Geneva? It's like this guy is peaceably passing through your territory. You hijack him, throw him in a cold cell, and then execute him for thought crimes that he didn't commit while in Geneva. And Jonathan Moorhead will lie. He'll say, these crimes are like a universal. There's like a universal law that's in effect. No, the immediate criticism is that you are hijacking a peaceable traveler and killing him for thought crimes. No, there's not this this universal law that just applies everywhere, that you could execute people for actions not done in your own territory. That's not a thing. That's just a Calvinist talking point that's just absolutely false. So there's a guy in Geneva killed on account for religion. Okay, some say that Swiss churches consented to the death of Servetus. That's number one lie. In Paul VI, The Life of Calvin, he says they already had their verdict before they sent out these letters. So this is a bold-faced lie. And if you read these letters, and Bolsick points this out too, that Calvin lies when Calvin later says all these churches said we should execute him, and so they're part of this. He's just lying. None of them said it. Zero of them said it. But Jonathan, and we'll get to that point in this podcast, Jonathan says, "Oh, not all of them consented to the death." Yeah, none of them did. None of them did. You liar. You absolute liar. They did not consent to the death. Not publicly, not in writing. Since they're party, so it's equally as bad because they're party to the cause. Because Servetus is talking against them as well. They shouldn't be judged. Servetus reported them together with the Geneva Church. Then they wonder that Calvin conspired with those churches for another man's death when he elsewhere condemned their doctrine. For in French, so Calvin's kind of a hypocrite, so he'll ally himself with people who think he's a heretic, who he thinks is a heretic, to try to put his personal enemies to death, as he did in Vienna when he colluded with the Catholics in order to try to get Servetus executed on Catholic territory. The second crime, this is the second accusation against Calvin, is that he was killed through Calvin's agency. For in order that Calvin might crush his enemies as his own, he suborned an accuser from his own kitchen, a man utterly ignorant of Servetus and the Servetine questions. So in Geneva, your accuser had to actually be the accuser. There needed to be someone who came against you with actual accusations. He just grabbed a random guy who was willing to be the accuser. He wrote up all the accusations for this guy. He refused to be the surety and go to jail in the course of the trial, as if you're usually the accuser, you would be in jail or have a stand-in or a surety to go to jail for you. Calvin first has the cook be the accuser, then he sends his brother as that surety. He himself spends no time in jail while he puts this guy in jail. Servetus puts him in this cold, damp place where he's getting eaten by lice and eaten by mice, while he and a team of people rip through Servetus's work. And so Calvin is a coward. And that's the charge here. They say that is far from the nature of Christ as the vulture is from heaven, for Christ came not to destroy but to save. The third is that he is killed so cruelty. So notice the second claim against him. It's about Calvin's agency. These are people who have lived with Calvin. They have lived in Geneva. They have been closely in contact with, for example, Castillo was basically a disciple of Calvin, Balsic as well. And there's a third individual who accuses him. I think it's Baldoon. He as well grew up under Calvin. All these people are saying Calvin's a tyrant. Calvin is putting himself as the Pope. Calvin has utter authority. This is Calvin's doing. Everything is being controlled and manipulated by Calvin. And so the Calvinists, such as Jonathan Moorhead here, looking at his name, he's going to be telling us, oh, Calvin was very weak. He didn't have any authority. And so it's really funny because his interviewer guy is really confused when he starts contradicting himself. When Jonathan Moorhead starts saying things like, oh, Calvin was called back to Geneva. And why? Because Calvin was authoritarian. And they wanted an authoritarian presence. The interviewer guy doesn't pick it up. The interviewer guy's like, okay. But he does pick up the fact that John Calvin's the one to get Servetus thrown in jail, whereas Jonathan had been portraying Calvin as, oh, he's not even a citizen. He can't do anything. He has no power. And he's like, but you just said he had no power. He's getting him thrown in jail. He completely underestimates and negates any role of Calvin in the trial. Calvin's name's all over this. Servetus, when he's writing in jail, who is he fighting against? He's not fighting against Geneva. He's not fighting against the Senate. It's all Calvin. Calvin, the person who has his immediate life threatened, who is deep in this event, knows is Calvin and Calvin's doing, and Calvin's controlling and pulling all the strings. But Jonathan will have us believe that Calvin is powerless. And he won't, of course, he'll say, oh, yeah, Calvin was recalled to... He said, Calvin was powerless. Remember, he was exiled from Geneva. Yeah, but then he was called back. Under what conditions? Oh, that he gets to rewrite the government? Did you forget to tell us that, Jonathan? You garbage person. Oh, anyways, okay. I gotta keep moving. The third is he is killed so cruelly, though as a supplicant he asked for the sword. So this is our only reference to the sword. People say, oh, Calvin argued for the sword. It's not clear that Calvin ever argued for the sword. Calvin did argue, according to his own testimony, for a lesser punishment. All right, this unheard of cruelty could give rise to the suspicion that the Genevans wished to return to favor with the Pope. And so this is the actual concern. Jonathan here will tell us, he'll say, oh man, the international concerns were that the Catholics are watching and like, oh, are you guys going to execute your authority to execute heretics? Because if you don't, bad on you. That wasn't their concerns. He's absolutely lying. The concern is if the Protestants start executing people like the Catholics do, they lose all legitimacy. They lose all criticism of the Catholics persecuting and burning heretics. That was the actual concern. So another lie by Jonathan Moorhead. We'll get to those. Might be spoiling some of what we're going to be going through. I've listened to this guy like 3 or 4 times. So the fourth is that the evangelicals conspired with the Papists to kill him. Yeah, John Calvin loses credibility when he conspires with his enemies to kill a different one of his enemies. That's the concern. People are criticizing Geneva for conspiring with a hated enemy, the Catholics, who are persecuting the Protestants. The fifth is that the books of Servetus were burned, something which, like the other things, they seem to have learned from the Pope. Yeah, now they're burning books. And so it's not here that Castillo mentions it, but he says, you guys have false piety. You say, oh, we're burning these books for, to save people and stuff like that. You guys print the Quran. You guys treat Turks and Muslims better than you treat Servetus. Geneva prints the Quran, so don't give us this, oh, you're saving people from these books by burning them. So what's actually going on is that Servetus actually makes arguments, and this is mentioned in one of the defenses of Servetus that are mocking Calvin for Calvin's cowardice and them putting to death someone peacefully transferring through their land. He talks about... where am I going with this? Kind of lost my train of thought just a little bit. Okay, so we're talking about they print the Quran. They execute someone who peaceably transfers through the territory. It'll come back to me. But anyways, we'll keep on going. This is an interesting part of these accusations. And indeed, if Calvin's doctrine of predestination and election is true, there's no reason for them to fear that Servetus would seduce anyone, since elect cannot be seduced. So this is Castillo, long before modern times, saying Calvinists do not believe their own theology. John Calvin doesn't believe his own theology. He believes people can be seduced away. He's taking active precautions. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. In the text it says, Servetus argues from biblical evidence and rationality. And so this is why This is why Calvin really needed these books burned and Servetus censored, because this is a good faith individual who has primacy of Scripture in mind, and he's making arguments that resonate with people, and just Calvin can't have that. He can't have this alternate interpretation and these questions lingering that puts pressure on his Trinitarian ideas. That's why he burns this guy. But if a sin happens necessarily, and God by compulsion, and by God's compulsion, Servetus could not have failed to do what he did, nor could the Calvinists fail to be deceived. Calvinists don't believe their own theology. This is being pointed out by Costello. All right, we'll keep moving. The sixth crime is that Servetus, even after death, was publicly condemned in sermons to external punishment. Those who heard Farrell declaiming to the effect of the sermon say that they shuddered their whole body and soul. Seventh crime, okay, there's seven. 7 crimes. Is that Calvin seems to be writing against him now that he's dead. This seems like the deed of the Jews, who after Christ died asked Pilate, calling Christ a deceiver, that his body be guarded. So what's happening is that Calvin kills this guy, burns his work, while the guy's in prison. This is another common complaint. He doesn't allow Servetus to have visitors unless they're high-ranking people. He doesn't allow him to address the public. At the exact same time, Calvin is preaching sermons inflaming the population against Servetus. This is written up by Costello, that this is what was happening. The population was being inflamed by Calvin's sermons, while Servetus is shut up in jail without any public voice. That there's a lot of crimes going on here. So it's almost like that Norm Macdonald Hitler joke. It's like, the more I learn about this guy, the less I like him. All right. So anyways, you know what I think about this Jonathan Moorhead guy. He's absolute scum, and he is a liar. And we'll point out these lies as they come. But we'll go ahead and start right here about the 1646 mark.
Horrible things happening in Paris, and so that's when Calvin fled Paris to Basel.
Okay.
Basel is a little bit more of a free
Switzerland,
state.
yeah.
And so that's where Erasmus was. A lot of freedom to write. Oecolampadius is there. Servetus ends up going to Basel at some point. And so he flees for his life. And so that's when he starts writing, streams in the desert type stuff. But
sorry, I don't know what that means.
Like, good things are happening even though you're in the desert.
Totally
so
get it. Okay.
Athanasius
Yeah.
is kicked out of his church, and what does he do? He starts writing. Jonathan Edwards is kicked out of his pastor. What's he do? He writes Freedom of the Will. It's Freedom of the Desert. That's a good book title for something like that, right?
Freedom of the Will? Yeah.
No, Streams of the Desert.
Oh,
that is
would
already
be
a book,
good.
right? But that's already, isn't that already a devotional or something?
No, this is your next book.
Okay.
Published through Christian Focus.
Yeah. Our mutual publisher,
that's right, man.
William McKenzie. Okay, so from there, Calvin agrees. I'm going to go back to Paris at risk of my life to meet with this guy who's anti-Trinitarian.
So was Erasmus...
Okay, so let's talk about this claim real quick. So this is the claim that the Calvinists make. Oh, Calvin is so benevolent that he made a very special trip to Paris to go meet with Servetus in order to try to save his soul and talk to him. And sure, yes. There's no documents here that describe Calvin's motivation. It doesn't actually. There's no documents that will describe why Calvin is in Paris in the first place. The reference to this is the only evidence we have of this trip. There's a reference to it during the trial, but it's inconclusive what's going on there. And the other reference we have is in Betza, who's a Calvinist apologist in his Life of Calvin. And so he doesn't state why Calvin actually went there to meet. I'll try to find the reference. But just think about this. All these critics of Calvin, when they're talking about events, they always say, yeah, we need to look at our own account of events. You can't trust Calvin to tell the truth. You can't trust these Calvinists to tell the truth. And what does Jonathan Moorhead do? He comes in, he takes all Calvin's words as gospel, all the pro-Calvinist side as historical fact, and then he'll discount any other accounts that we have. He'll discount the death of Servetus narrative that we have from Costello, published within months of the death. He'll discount that. And so this is what they'll do. It's like, oh, their friends, they will take without a grain of salt anyone criticizing Calvin, that their works need to be discarded entirely. And so the funny thing is that all these critics of Calvin tend to have fairly consistent character profiles of Calvin, so much so that Calvin dies, and Betza writes a life of Calvin, and we got to pull it up. We'll skip the Servetus Paris thing right now. We'll pull up Betza in his life of Calvin. He actually lists all these complaints that are pretty common about Calvin at the time. So think about this. How many biographies is their entire section dedicated to redeeming character tropes about the person in question? How many lives ofs have to try to salvage someone's character by saying, hey, this is false, this is false, this is false? Is it only Calvin? That might tell you something. Within Calvin's life, during his life, all these things are known about his personality, how he operates, how he thinks. These are not coming from nowhere. This is not retrospective, out of context, like people just, yeah, Calvin killed Servetus, and therefore he was bad and mean. And though people knew this about Calvin, that he was a hothead, that he's irrational, that he's full of himself, that he thinks of himself as God. All right, I gotta find it. Where did it run off to? Okay. Here's the list of accusations. This is from Betza, a Calvin supporter, in his life of Calvin, published right after Calvin died. So how many biographies have this? Okay, it says, I will not answer those who call him a heretic, and worse than a heretic, for whom they've forged a new name, Calvinist, for his doctrine supplies more than sufficient answers for the contrary. Okay. Some have charged him with ambition, but if they can allege a single argument for it, I'm content to let judgment pass against me. Was there ever a man who followed greater simplicity in the exposition of Scripture? And yet who had more with which to display himself, if he had wished to profane Scripture by subtleties and vain ostentations? Yeah, the criticism, you wrote an entire book. If your doctrine was clear, you would not have to declare your book gospel and then forbid criticism of your book. That's one of the criticisms. They say he wished to govern everything. Oh, vile and false shamelessness! What a preeminence did he ever seek? And if he had sought it, who would have prevented him from having it? With whom did he ever have a quarrel? Over the first or second place, when people deferred to him, what belonged to the gifts and graces God had placed in him, when he ever was seen to change even slightly, blah, blah, blah. In brief, whatever difference did you see in him and ourselves, except for he surpassed us all in every humility among other virtues, and in this he alone took more pains than all of us. He's better. They had all the virtues, more than any one of us. And if I and 10,000 witnesses are not believed, then at least let the little accounts of his brother and sole heir, then inventory of all his goods, be believed. His whole estate and even his books were sold dearly, because his memory was most precious to all the learned. He had a cult. It did not exceed 200 crowns. This will also answer those shameless slanderers who had gone so far as to make him an usurer and others a banker. How do you get the reputation of being a usurer and a banker? Going on, he was so very avaricious that in having a total of 600 florins his salary, which amounts to only 300 livres, whatever. He was so covetous of goods of the world that, being esteemed and honored by kings, blah, blah, he doesn't have too much money. Oh, he is so humble. He had the sacred word of God in such reverence, he had rather have died than use it as bait for ambition and avarice. Oh, okay. We're going down. As for others dedicated to certain kings, princes, or republics, his purpose was to encourage some by his means to persevere in the protection of the children of God. Okay, some others, to the quite the contrary, have made him out to be a prodigal and a gambler. How do you get these charges? How do you get these charges? Okay, as for lechery, how do you get accused of being a lech? Okay, so after his wife died, he remained a widower for about 16 years until his death. In all this time, whoever perceived the least sign in the world of such unworthy stain. Okay, so Calvin had one individual killed who was killed because anonymous note was attributed to him, even though it wasn't his handwriting. And then what's found on Calvin's chair, it's like love letters from like women or whatever. And it might be the case that someone was saying, hey, you're going to accuse a guy to death and kill a man on these charges. But then you're just going to look the other way when the same thing happens to Calvin. When these unnamed, anonymous things show up in Calvin's possession, you're not even going to accuse him or try him on the same evidence standards that you did to other people. And so there are certain accusations that come from anonymous sources about Calvin's sexual life that will probably skip. There's diddling servant boys. Probably a false rumor, but the rumors do exist. All right. So, blah, blah, blah. We keep going. Fornications, adulteries, incests are things regarded as pastime and exercises by these wretches, blah, blah, blah. Oh, as for heretics, okay. This is great. This is Betza. This is a defense of Calvin. Calvin has the title of bloodthirsty. Everyone sees him as a bloodthirsty Pope of Geneva. This is something that happened during his lifetime. Our Jonathan Moorhead will never tell us this, but this is the reputation that Calvin had within his own lifetime of being the Pope of Geneva, being a tyrant, executing people on mere whims for personal grudges. This is his ongoing reputation. As for heretics, where, I ask you, is the great rigor? Where has this bloodthirsty man shown a bloody nature? There are a few cities in Switzerland and Germany where Anabaptists have not been put to death. Yep, Anabaptists, there's like 5 killed before Servetus in different cities. There's only one person. He says it right here. And rightly so. Here they have been content with banishment. Bolsec blasphemed there against the providence of God. So Bolsec was imprisoned for months for questioning predestination. There's a law in Geneva where you cannot question institutes of the Christian religion. Yeah, John Calvin, his writings were gospel. You would go to jail for months for criticizing this, and Jonathan Moorhead will be like, "He's powerless. Did you know he wasn't a citizen? He couldn't carry a sword. He's powerless." You go to jail for months for disagreeing with Calvin and criticizing institutes. You go to jail. And so Bolsec, of course, was banished. Sebastian Castillo, he writes, he also was run out of Geneva. And so both these people, Bolsec, of course, wrote The Life of Calvin that we were already talking about, which gives a character portrait of Calvin. And Castillo also talks about the character of Calvin. These are people who are intimately familiar with Calvin, and the Calvinists just dismiss them without a second thought. Oh, they're biased. Their character profiles. They're just enemies of. These guys like grew up with Calvin. These guys developed spiritually. They learned under him. They were intimately familiar with him. That they might have something to tell us about Calvin's character. Valentin there blasphemed against the divine essence. None of those men died there. 2 were simply banished. The 3rd escaped with the honorable amends to God and the lordship. Where's the cruelty? one Servetus alone was burned there. He's like, we only killed one guy. Calvin's not bloodthirsty. He only killed this one dude. This is Betza. Betza's making this apology for Calvin. Calvin only killed one dude. He's not bloodthirsty. There's just the one time. He's just slightly murdery. The interesting thing is that when this is revised, this is the French version that comes out right away. When it gets revised, all this stuff goes away in the longer edition of Betza's Life of Calvin. So he pulls all this out. And so they might be in damage repair mode at that point, because a lot of these personal insults and these rumors about Calvin and these character portraits, a lot of these things were circulating in pamphlets and things that we just don't have access to today. And so if he would have ignored all these things, like, we would have lost a lot of these accusations or had less sources for it. But we got straight from the mouth of Calvin's biographer about Calvin being known as bloodthirsty within his own lifetime. And then him defending it, he's like, it's just the one. Just one. Yeah, he just killed the one guy. Okay. There are others who found him much too angry. Yeah, he's got a reputation for anger. Huh. How does one get a reputation for anger? I do not wish to make the man into an angel. Oh, he's like, I'll give you this one. Okay, once in a while he's a little angry. Just once in a while he'd kill a guy. Once in a while he's a little angry. Because I know how marvelously God made use of even this vehemence, I must not be silent about what it is and what I know of it. It's like his anger was righteous anger. Besides his natural inclination to anger, his wonderfully prompt spirit, the indiscretion of many, the infinite multitude and variety of the affairs of the Church of God, toward the end of his life, great and ordinary illness, made him irritable and difficult. Yeah, he was like a little inclined to anger. Yeah, that's true. But there's reasons. But he was so far from taking pleasure in this fault that, on the contrary, no one perceived it better or found it so great as he did himself. He is such a humble. He was the most humble person who ever lived. And so this is who they take as like a serious biographer of Calvin. That these Calvinists are like, oh, Betza said this and Betza did this, and this is what Betza said about. They're like, what is it? This is a hagiography. He's all sorts of insane praises at Calvin, and you'll see once my third volume's published. Okay, volume 1's published. That's the trial documents. Volume 2 is published. These are the letters surrounding the whole event, primarily from Calvinistic sources. Other letters, as I could find them, are brought in. But the third volume is going to have. Okay, I'm going to go to the index real quick. So we have Baldwin. Now, Baldwin was the guy who Calvin thought wrote an anonymous pamphlet about reconciliation with the Catholic Church. And so John Calvin writes, Calvin says, well, I didn't write it. Just most of that pamphlet came from my preachings and teachings, and so I'll claim the pamphlet. Calvin does this thing where he never wants to take direct responsibility for anything, so he's always like, it wasn't me who killed Servetus, not only me. It's like, all the churches they did that too. Did you? Like Calvin knows that he's perceived as a dictator. He knows that he is perceived as someone controlling all these events. He tries very hard to try to share culpability. Share responsibility. He doesn't want to be seen as a pope. He doesn't want to be seen as a dictator and a tyrant, although he is. And so he keeps trying to reframe these things. Every single critic of Calvin knows that Calvin's behind everything, pulling the strings. No one's blaming the Geneva government. No one's blaming these other churches. Calvin is in this constant propaganda campaign share the blame, share the responsibility, say he's not the only one, but nobody believes him. No one in his lifetime believes him. And then you have these Calvinists, Jonathan Moorhead. I got his name without looking. Jonathan Moorhead's like, oh, these churches signed off on it, just repeating Calvin talking points that it's obvious lies. Obvious lies. Ball 6 says it's an obvious lie. You can just go read the letters and you can see it's a lie. And Jonathan Moorhead's repeating the lie. All right, but we could read Baldwin. And Baldwin actually, in his commentary on the laws concerning the defamatory labels and slanders, he builds a character profile of Calvin. And I actually got that. I got a summary of it, so we could just read it real quick, figure out who Calvin is. I know we haven't touched the video very much, but I think this is a little bit important. John Calvin, in Baldwin's portrait, as brilliant but dangerous religious authority, learned, forceful, eloquent, and influential, yet increasingly governed by anger, suspicion, pride, and an appetite for command. Baldwin does not depict him as ignorant or insignificant. He repeatedly assumes Calvin is a major theologian, a man of great reputation, a former teacher, and someone whose words, because he actually grew up under Calvin's tutelage, a man of great reputation, former teacher, and someone whose words carry public force. This is precisely why Baldwin considers him dangerous. Calvin's authority magnifies his faults. Baldwin's Calvin is a dictator figure. He is portrayed as someone who wants to reign alone in the religious controversy, impose silence on others, thunder against opponents, and treat disagreements as disloyalty and impiety. I'm going to read that again. Calvin wants to treat disagreements as disloyalty or impiety. You'll see these throughout the letters, where if there's any slight sign of disagreement, it's like, oh, we should have probably imprisoned Servetus instead of killed him. It's like, oh, you're a follower of Servetus. There's like these denunciations, and there's these loyalty tests. You have to stick to Calvin's teaching, or else all of a sudden you're a follower of Servetus, or you're a Pelagian. Very cultish setting. Baldwin suggests Calvin behaves as though he sits above ordinary courts, connoisseurs, presbyterites, councils, and judgment. In other words, Calvin is accused of acting as his own judgment has become law. This is one of the people who accuse Calvin of being Pope of Geneva, someone who actually lived in Geneva and actually was fighting Calvin. Major trait is credulity towards informers. Borden says Calvin is easily stirred up by messengers, informers, and hostile reports. Calvin is not shown carefully verifying facts before attacking. Rather, he is depicted as a man who receives slander, believes it too quickly, and then weaponizes it publicly. Baldwin's complaint is that Calvin condemned him over a pamphlet he did not write without hearing him first. He also paints Calvin as emotionally volatile. He calls attention to Calvin's ardent nature, bilious temperament, and blind passions, and tendency to be carried away by love, hatred, ambition, or zeal. Calvin's zeal in this profile is not pure courage for the truth, but a dangerous force that can become rage. Baldwin's central warning is that religious zeal, when not restrained by law, charity, and due process, becomes cruelty. Calvin is also portrayed as rhetorically savage. I'm going to jump down more. Another major feature is hypocrisy and inconsistency. I'm going to jump down. On heresy and punishment, Baldwin presents Calvin as a man of new and capital decrees. Interesting. I thought execution for heresy was just commonplace. Not that these are new and capital decrees. Maybe our friend Jonathan is just lying to us. Not yet. He will in the future. Predicting the future here. All right. Personal betrayal theme is strong. Okay, and then we have John Calvin's response. John Calvin writes a big response to this, and it's just the most utterly unhinged, insane rant. And he says that Baldwin doesn't know why Calvin singled him out, and he's saying that Calvin's just singling him out for like no reason. And Calvin's like, why would I do that? I have all sorts of enemies, and guess what? Every single one of my enemies is an enemy of Christ. Calvin thinks himself as God. So all his enemies are enemies of God. There's not a single honest disagreement. There's not a single person who's on God's side who disagrees with him. All his enemies are enemies of God. It's unhinged rant. And so I wasn't quite sure if I was being too harsh on Calvin and not harsh enough on Baudin. And so I ran it through ChatGPT and I said, is this a rational and proportionate response? And it came back, it's like, absolutely not. This is like a partisan response. That's that there's rational reasons why he's doing it, but it's over the top, it's partisan, he's setting out to destroy. Like he's doing classic cult type responses. So this is who Calvin is. Calvin is a really bad human being with a bad personality, a bad temper, and he's a narcissist. He's so full of himself, he equates himself with God. He becomes the Pope of Geneva, a common claim against him within his own lifetime that he's the Pope of Geneva. All right, so back to the show.
Erasmus particularly influential? I mean, I'm trying to think what would compel Calvin to go and essentially
Not
deal
Erasmus,
face to
Servetus, right?
Yeah, sorry, Servetus. What would compel him to go back and deal face to face with someone that he's essentially written off as kind of erratic and crazy and
Yeah, and so that's
heretical?
a great question, for people that
He's not really confronting him. He stays silent. He's said to have been silent, only talked to a few individuals transitioning through Geneva. I might have said he's transitioning to Spain in the last podcast. He's transitioning to Italy. He's coming from France, transitioning through Geneva, going to Italy, and that's where he's caught. So it doesn't necessarily seem like a confrontation that he was looking to be vocal. And that's one of the common criticisms is this guy wasn't doing anything in your territory. He wasn't stirring up rebellion. He wasn't preaching. He wasn't making a ruckus. He wasn't disturbing church service. Bullsec, when he's fighting predestination, he disrupts like a church service. That's part of the reason that he's arrested. Servetus is doing none of that. He's just yanked out of a crowd, identified, and then executed. He's not causing a ruckus. And so Jonathan Moorhead here, he doesn't actually distinguish this when he talks about, Servetus was being verbally abusive. He's only verbally abusive after he's in prison. He's fighting for his life. He's in this cold, dark cell without adequate clothing. And he's like literally dying in there as his accuser gets to run rampant with the law. Just do whatever he wants. And so This is the situation we're in. Servetus is not causing disturbances, and he's arrested.
I think that Calvin is just a bloodthirsty murderer that's out for his blood, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I think that's one of the points in the book too, that he showed his love for this guy to, at the risk of his life, to go to Paris on a
Yeah, it's not certain that he actually risked his life to go to Paris for this meeting. He could have been in Paris for other reasons. It's not clear what's going on there.
specific day, a specific street, and a specific location.
And these are coming from pro-Calvin sources, and so those sources need to be taken with a grain of salt. Again, all the critics of Calvin say these guys are not to be trusted. Beza is not to be trusted. Calvin is not to be trusted. Bullinger, Farrell, these people are not to be trusted with their version of events.
Yeah.
And guess who doesn't show up?
No.
Servetus.
And it's not an easy trip.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, even Geneva right now, that's not Basel's about 2 hours north up the road, or northeast, but still in a car 5.5 hours to Paris from Geneva. So imagine going on a horse. Yeah. So I imagine it was very frustrating.
Yeah. What was the reason for his not showing?
No account given in
Okay.
the original documents.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's something that Calvin brings up after Servetus is already condemned to die, the day before he's taken, or maybe it was the same day that Calvin reminds him at the risk of his own life, he tried to convince him of the truth, and Servetus still rejected that.
Yeah.
So, where are we at? 1534, 1536, Calvin is going to Geneva, is grabbed by the beard by Guillaume Farel. It's like if you don't stay in Geneva, God's going to curse
judgment,
your writings, And so, but the correspondence still continues. And I forget the year that they stopped corresponding, or that Calvin stopped writing.
Yeah.
But even then, with this compulsive kind of nature, Servetus starts writing other pastors in Geneva, very vitriolic language. You worship a three-headed Cerberus, and just you have worship an imagination, and just not conducive to a collegial conversation,
to put it lightly.
Yeah.
And this matters because later when we talk about what happens with the trial, it needs to be understood that Calvin's not sort of unilaterally making these decisions. It's happening with a bunch of
according to Castillo and Calvin critics, he is kind of unilaterally making these decisions. And so Calvin has immense influence in Geneva. He's the one prosecuting. We have to wait for it. But Jonathan Moorhead minimizes Calvin's role in the trial and gives this guy, I don't know who this guy is, Room for Nuance host. He gives him a false impression of what's going on. And so he gets confused when Servetus is like verbally abusing Calvin. Like, what does Calvin have to do with this trial? Calvin is the trial. Calvin is the trial. That's what's on trial, is Calvin. In Servetus's mind, Calvin is the accuser. Calvin is the person controlling the government, who put him in prison, who's trying to get him killed. That's who Servetus is fighting. In Servetus's own mind, by Servetus's own words, Jonathan Moorhead fails to mention this. It minimizes his role in the trial. His massive primary role in the trial is minimized by Jonathan Moorhead. The guy is such a scumbag.
Pastors in the area all convening to render this judgment, right?
Yeah, so just to step back from the chronologies, just in general, Calvin, some people think, this is the Pope of Geneva.
Right.
Some people, at the time that Calvin lived, common criticism, people fled Geneva because of the Pope of Geneva. People who grew up and lived around Calvin, were close associates with Calvin, fled Geneva and said that Calvin's the Pope of Geneva. That's who's calling him Pope of Geneva. You scumbag Jonathan Moorhead.
And it couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, a great book, if your readers haven't or listeners haven't heard of it, is Scott Manish's book, A Company of Pastors. And
Luke, can you pull that up?
Yeah, Company of Pastors. It's a white hardback cover, but excellent. And it's great for pastoral ministry stuff too, ecclesiology. But there are 4 operational churches in Geneva at the time Calvin is there. And they all preach in each other's churches. There's stuff happening every Sunday in each one of those churches.
Yeah, so how many people of these churches actually form the government that they're operating under? How many people have their books declared as gospel and you can't question those books? How many of those, Jonathan Moorhead? You lying scumbag.
They have a company of pastors, a venerable company of pastors. They meet every week, over 20 guys getting together from the pastors in town and outside of the town. Calvin is kind of like a first among equals, but there's several documented cases where he recuses himself from.
Sometimes he doesn't make the decision. He's got no power. He recuses himself. So obviously someone who doesn't have power recuses themselves from decisions. That makes sense, right? Like, what are you talking about? If he's recusing himself, that means he's got a lot of power. Like, why would he recuse yourself? So it's full of contradictions and lies and misrepresenting. Lies of omission, lies of misrepresentation. It's real bad.
From decisions, and he describes there is equality among the pastors.
Calvin said there's equality among the pastors. Oh, wow. Okay, we got to remember who Calvin is. Calvin is a megalomaniac. He's obsessed with himself. He himself is God. And so any questioning of him is a questioning of God. He doesn't like to be seen as the Pope. And so he's making all these false references to, these decisions are being made collectively. It's not me. Nobody believes Calvin. Within Calvin's lifetime, no one's buying this. No one's eating it up. But these are talking points that modern Calvinists have picked up, and they're repeating as if these things are true. That's what's happening here.
And so I think that's a great lesson for us to learn when we have this kind of pyramid approach to, the pastor.
Yeah.
I think Calvin would say the pastor of the church is Jesus Christ. We're under shepherds.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the trial, it's even more significant because Calvin is not a citizen. And so,
Oh, yeah, okay. So this is one of their idiotic talking points. Calvin wasn't a citizen. He had no power. Okay, what was Calvin's role at the trial? How much talking did Calvin do? Did Calvin write up the articles of accusation? Did Calvin have the guy arrested, write up the articles, publicly appointed? And Servetus calls all this out. This is one of the things that Geneva, they pretend to be neutral, and they say, oh, we just asked Calvin to participate. And he's like, you people are liars. This is not like this passive thing where it's just like you're just asking him to participate. He is the primary architect of what's happening here. I gotta go to it. I gotta go read it because blah 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 blah. Okay. Here's the statement, and this is in volume 1. This is the brief refutation of the errors of the impieties of Michael Servetus. This is written by Calvin, because Calvin writes like 99% of the documents in the trial against Servetus, because he was incredibly active. This is his trial. He's the de facto prosecutor. And so Calvin has this title, the brief refutation of the errors and impieties of Michael Servetus, offered by the ministers of the Church of Geneva to the magnificent Senate, as they have been commanded. He's saying, Calvin was just commanded to do this. And he says, first you offer yourself as accuser, then you arrange to be ordered to do it, you hypocrite. He's saying, Calvin, this is all you're doing. This is not, you're not just being ordered to take part in this trial. Your hand is behind all of this. And you see that. And so Calvin couldn't dodge these accusations. You'll see Calvin taking credit where there's irrefutable evidence that Calvin's hand is involved. And so in his defense, he's like, I admit it was me, my accusation. I'm the one who's doing this. Moorhead doesn't mention any of this because he's a lying piece of garbage. He's just such a bad human being. And so Calvin says this. I gotta just find the reference. Like this is not like a secret. All right, so he says, we covered this last time. Yet it's not so much this writing that must be defended as the punishment inflicted upon the man, for whatever was done by our Senate is everywhere attributed to me. This is Calvin's frustration. Calvin really doesn't like that every single person thinks that he's acting unilaterally. Calvin doesn't like it, but everyone at his time knows that that's what's happening. And the French version adds, by ignorant people, because they need to be extra clear that he's trying to communicate that he isn't the sole authority in Geneva. Nor indeed do I conceal that by my effort and counsel was he rightly thrown into prison, since according to the received law of the city, someone had to bring the accused man to trial of crime. I admit that I pursued the case to this extent. From the time he was convicted, all the good men will be my witness that I said not a word about the punishment, and I even allow the wicked to bring forth any evidence he has. He says, this is Calvin, he says, I didn't say anything about how he should be punished, and so, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong? We got letters talking about you wanting him executed. We got letters of that, Calvin, huh? And so we actually have letters talking about secret letters that were being sent back and forth as well. You wanted him executed. You were public about that to your friends, and your friends had extreme influence on the trial outcomes as well. You are secretly communicating to these people what you want. You're preaching vitriolic sermons against this person in public. Okay, so while we're on this subject, we're going to go to volume 3, which is not published yet, and we're going to go to that response we're going to go to John Calvin's response to Baudouin, and this is a famous statement as well, in which Calvin talks about his role in the Servetus affair. Because Baudouin makes this claim. He says, listen, you're liable to be executed for disagreeing with John Calvin. He's just going to kill you for disrespecting him or not agreeing with him. And Calvin takes this as a reference to Servetus, which it absolutely is. If you get on Calvin's bad side, Baldwin says, they're going to kill you. This is what it was commonly seen as. And so this is what he's responding to with the famous quote. Where did it run off to? All right. Here's the Baldwin reference to Paris. Okay, we'll read, or the Betza reference to Paris. Sometime later, Calvin returned to Paris, as if called there by the very hand of God. So it's not clear that Servetus was the reason that he went to Paris. It's not clear that that's happening. For that, impious Servetus had come there. So he's almost making it as if it's coincidental that Calvin is in Paris the same time as Servetus. He already spread his poison against the Trinity. Servetus says he desires nothing more than conversation. This seems to be like Servetus learned he's in town. He asks for a meeting and then doesn't show up. And Betza says that it's because Servetus could not endure the sight of Calvin. Well, they've never met. And so that's an interesting claim by Betza. Anyways, back to Servetus and John Calvin's response to the abuses. Okay, where are we run off to? Oh, okay, here, yeah, this is it. I got it. What more odious is what follows? And so this is what Bowden writes. Unless my counsels are opposed, he's attributing this to Calvin, and so he's talking in Calvin's voice. Unless my counsels are opposed, not only the case, but even the life itself must be lost, and one must utterly perish if something slips out that does not please me. He's putting these words in Calvin's mouth. That if someone makes Calvin mad, Calvin's going to kill him. And so Calvin responds to this charge. He says, perhaps Castillo obtained this. He's like, these words are getting from Castillo. Like, because he's paranoid. Part of Calvin's character is that, like, he's highly neurotic. And so he's paranoid. It's like, yeah, this must be Castillo's doing. They must be good friends for writing this. That he would undertake the defense of Servetus's cause. Criticizing you for killing people for disagreeing with you is just taking up Servetus's cause. Right. And so in Balzac's history, the history of Life of Calvin, he talks about Servetus, and he's like, what John Calvin did was terrible, but then he condemns Servetus in the harshest terms. Like, you don't have to agree with Servetus and his theology to understand that grabbing a guy off the streets for thought crimes who's not stirring up any riots or anything and just executing him for his genuine defense of his belief with the primacy of Scripture, that's a bad thing, right? And so he's paranoid, he's neurotic. Well, this must be Castillo's doing that you said this. He says this about Servetus. He indeed paid just penalties, but was it my will? Certainly, arrogance destroyed the man no less than impiety. And so this is what I was saying. In the previous podcast, Servetus is not killed for heresy. Servetus is killed for disrespecting John Calvin in public. And so this is a personal grudge. This is literally a personal grudge. And this is pretty good evidence to the case. Servetus is not killed for heresy. He is killed for insulting John Calvin and insulting John Calvin in a public way. And so this is why these other heretics and Jonathan Moorhead, he tells the host, he's like, yeah, this is just a thing of the times that they'd kill heretics like that. And then he's like, oh, so they must have killed a bunch of heretics. He's like, oh, actually, a bunch of heretics would transition through Geneva all the time without issue. All right, you got one heretic, one execution. And so Moorhead, he lies to the host. He says this is commonplace and this is expected. Oh yeah, and then there's only one execution of heresy. Oh yeah, and then all these other heretics transition regularly through everything. So you see the character nature of the Calvinist apologetics. Okay. He indeed paid just penalties, but was it my will? Certainly his arrogance destroyed the man no less than his impiety. Yeah, this was personal for Calvin. But what crime of it is mine? If our Senate, at my exhortation, indeed, yet according to the judgment of several churches, avenged his execrable blasphemies, he's like, what? Sure, it's me that's behind all this, but that's just their doing. It's them. They're the ones who passed the judgment. Yes, I was part of it, and I exhorted them to do it. But how is that a crime? It's just they're the ones who did it. I was just the person behind it that was instigating. This is what we're talking about. So John Calvin is psychotic and neurotic, and you'll get that when you start reading through his letters. And then so you read through his letters, and it's always like, oh, I'm being so persecuted, I'm at the end of my rope. Like he's incredibly neurotic. Jonathan Moorhead will say, oh, he's at a low at this time, he doesn't know, he might be quitting here. Yeah, because he's crazy. He's crazy. It's not that he doesn't have power, is he doesn't have absolute power. That's his crying complaint. He literally rewrites the government. He literally is the moral police that goes around Geneva. He literally is throwing people in jail for questioning predestination. This is what's happening at that time. Oh, he's powerless. He's not a citizen. He doesn't get to carry a sword around.
He could not vote. He could not be on the jury.
Oh.
He couldn't be a judge. He couldn't even carry a weapon.
Oh, he couldn't carry. Oh, then the host is like, very insightful. He couldn't carry it. So the host has this completely wrong idea about Calvin and his involvement, and so he gets confused later on.
So I think it's not till 1559, and Servetus is executed in 53, not till 1559 that he actually gets citizenship.
Oh.
So the magistrates officially are the ones that make the final decision.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yep.
All right, so let's go back to the timeline.
Yep.
Where did we leave off?
Okay, so 1536.
That's helpful. It's not going to give you an accurate picture of what's happening in Geneva. Okay, there is a free book online. I don't know if it's supposed to be free, but you could just Google it and then you could get it. And it seems to be by a neutral individual who's not a Calvinist. He's just a historian. Where did it run off to? Okay, and it's called, The Consistory and Social Discipline in Calvin's Geneva. And it's, who's this by? Like Williams? I don't want to click on it because then it'll load. But that's what it's called. So just put in Social Discipline, Calvin's Geneva. You'll get a free PDF, a 300-page book. And I'll talk about these things. It'll give the instance of the person who is caught saying there's no more laughter in Geneva. Like John Calvin has sucked all laughter out of Geneva. People saying, hey, it's better when the Catholics ruled. Different people are saying these things. It'd be better if the Catholics ruled. And so that's a good book to kind of understand Calvin's power. That also gives the instance in which that man was thrown out of his job for saying that Calvin was a hothead. As his criticism, Calvin is a hothead. He never gets to work again. Calvin ensures that man never has a job again. This is who we're dealing with. Calvin was a really terrible person. And so then you have Jonathan Moorhead sitting here defending his character. And it's just absolutely terrible.
It's another reason for people it's helpful to people to know that Calvin's not the Pope of Geneva is that he was actually kicked out of the city.
Yep.
1538 to 1541.
Oh, 1541. On what conditions did he come back, Jonathan Moorhead? That he gets to rewrite the government? That he gets absolute moral control over Geneva? Are you going to tell us these things, Jonathan Moorhead? I'm going to hit play. We're going to see if Jonathan Moorhead describes the conditions by which Calvin agreed to return to Geneva.
Over the purity of the Lord's Supper, that he would not give it to just anyone that came that was living in adultery or whatever, the libertines.
So this is what I'm saying. This man is like morally corrupt. Jonathan Moorhead is a bad person.
So then he went to Strasbourg. Martin Butzer is like a father figure to him. He gets married to Idolette, and great time pastoring a French church there.
Sorry, for those who may not know, can you remind us who Martin Butzer is?
Yeah, so
Or
Butzer,
that's not his first name. Sorry.
yeah, Martin Butzer is pastoring in Strasbourg.
Okay.
And so he eventually goes to Oxford and dies there, but just a real fatherly figure to him, and teaching him about the consistory, what would become the consistory, shepherding ministry there. He wrote concerning the care of souls, I think, which is in print today. You can get that.
Yeah, so Calvin had the authority to just pull anyone he wanted into an Inquisition-style interrogation. And there's the comment, Calvin banned dancing in Geneva. What a killjoy. And so the other name that usually comes up for Calvin executing heretics is, I don't remember the guy's name offhand. I'll grab it real quick. Heretics executed Geneva Calvin. Okay, so Servetus is the one name, but they'll give you a second name as well. And the second name is this guy, and I'll tell you the story. The story is going to be in the book that I pointed everyone to. Not coming up. But this guy's... okay, Jacques Gruet. And so this individual is pulled in front of Calvin for seeing people dance or knowing about people dancing or something. And he's not going to be a narc. And so he lies to Calvin about seeing or knowing about people dancing. And so this is like strike one on him. And so Calvin goes to town, like jails and excommunication and things like that on this guy. And so it starts escalating, and eventually a note is found in one of the churches that is disparaging of the ministers of Geneva. And this they tie to this individual, this disgruntled individual. It's not like the same handwriting or anything, but they tie it to this person, and they execute him for not necessarily heresy, but for insurrectionist or bad-mouthing ministers, that sort of stuff. And so that whole affair is going to be detailed in that book. But there's another name of someone who actually was just under Calvin's skin and just got executed for literally being an enemy of Calvin.
He's one of the ones that even said you need to kind of back off from being with William Farel too much, because Farel is kind of a fighter figure and just trying to calm Calvin down in some areas. But he learned a lot from Butzer, so that when he was invited to go back to Geneva in 1541, he had a lot more clout, more authority going into the situation, but a lot more pastorally minded.
Oh, he had more clout and authority. What does that constitute? What does that constitute? What year did Geneva declare? I'll ask Rock. What year did Geneva declare institutes the gospel? Yeah. So that they don't literally call it the gospel, but they make any contradicting it a crime. All right. It told me the right answer before. I gotta go find it in my chat history. Crime to speak ill of institutes. Yeah, so there is a letter in the list of letters in which there is a man actually being harassed because he doesn't consider Calvin's words the gospel. And so Calvin's followers, his acolytes, these cultists that he's stirring up against Servetus in his sermons, These people consider his words the gospel. It is not pulling up the correct sources. I'll pull it up. We'll let these guys talk.
Yeah.
On how to shepherd.
Can you remind us why he was kicked out?
Yeah.
The Lord's Supper thing, but
Yeah.
When I say how he was kicked out, I mean, is it like he's escorted out by armed guards, or he's just sort of formally invited to not be there anymore? Is it ugly affair? Is it a clean affair?
Yeah, so the issue, he goes into Geneva initially, and remember, this is a city that was just run by Catholicism, the Duke of Savoy, for the longest time. 10% of the people there, of 10,000.
Yeah, Josh says he found a copy of Servetus's work, and it has the 30 letters to John Calvin. So 30 letters might be a misnomer. This guy, Jonathan Moorhead, portrays it as if they had this correspondence of back and forth, and there's 30 letters. Well, there's 30 questions that were sent to John Calvin, whether or not they were in 30 letters, and it wasn't this big back and forth correspondence. Any letters that existed from Calvin to Servetus, we just don't have access to anymore. We just have kind of like passing references to, like, at one point Calvin wrote something to Servetus at some point. We don't have those letters. We just have all these questions, and these questions and comments are some of the stuff that was turned over to the Catholics to try to get Servetus executed, that John Calvin definitely had a hand in. John Calvin is trying to distance himself from that as well. He denies being the initial informant, but that's in question as well. Castillo writes that Calvin might have wrote directly to the government in a separate instance to try to get Servetus killed.
They were clergy, many of them living in sin, adultery, prostitution is rampant.
Yeah.
And so if that's true for even the priests, imagine the people.
Yeah.
And so it was a major problem. But it was never a problem to give communion to whoever wanted it, for whoever came to the Mass. But then when Calvin came and had a view of the purity of the supper, that you don't give the supper to those that were blatantly, openly living in sin, that made sense ecclesiologically, theologically, but for people coming out of Catholicism.
So it's not just people living in sin, it's just anyone who insults Calvin. And so there was the guy that we talked about last time who had just said that, my friends, I'll give you my coat if my friends aren't morally superior to you ministers of Geneva. And for that, he's excommunicated, not allowed to have communion. And so this guy, an adulterer, whoremongering thing. No, it's just anyone who hurts Calvin's feelings is subject to Calvin's wrath. And this is what Calvin's going to quit over. The government saying, hey, this guy, you have to readmit him to communion. And Calvin is going to throw in the towel. He's telling his people, he preaches a sermon that Jonathan Moorhead, he portrays it as Calvin's at the end of his ropes, his authority's collapsing, and he preaches what's going to be his last sermon. This is mentioned in Betz's Life of Calvin. His sermons don't exist for this time. He preached sermons against Servetus. He preaches this farewell sermon, but it wasn't this, oh, I'm powerless and everything's crumbling around me. It's, I'm going to quit and go home because the government's making me give communion to this guy who said that his friend is more morally upright than a Genevan minister. That's what this is about. He is... Calvin deleted his tweets. Maybe. We don't know why these sermons are missing. But this is the issue. Calvin is a petulant child throwing a hissy fit saying, I'm going to quit and take my toys and go home because you're trying to execute a little bit of judgment over me. That's what's actually happening. Not that he's being defeated and surrounded by enemies. This is just Calvin's neuroticism, documented neuroticism that we're seeing play out, that he's treating as Calvin's like a rational, logical player in all of this.
Magistrates who are trying to maintain peace in the city, that was too much too quick.
And the magistrates had a say.
Yeah.
in this.
And so this is going to start this not complete divide, but this fracture of church and state.
Okay.
Because in the covenant, that the view of the church and the state that are wed, that makes sense. The church and the state are kind of together in some sense. And then the question is, who has authority over whom to tell the pastors who you can excommunicate and who you cannot, and who you can give the Lord's Supper to and you cannot.
I know we're going down a side trail. That's okay. We'll get back to the main thread here in a second. But is this where things begin to clarify in Calvin's mind? Was he confused about church and state stuff?
Okay, I got the reference. We're going to pull up the book, Did Calvin Murder Servetus? It doesn't like rendering on this screen, so I'll just have to read it to you. Okay. Regardless, the institutes were a great success in a short time. Consequently, we'll keep going. Okay, Calvin said back in law school days, his interest grew cold in law. He turned to the study of Scripture. Then something amazing happened while in law school. 1 year had not elapsed before all those who were desirous of knowledge of pure doctrines flocked to me for instruction, while as yet myself a beginner. Finally, this self-perception grew into enormous height. Calvin, by 1552, came to believe that his words in the Institute were God's doctrine. So this is 1552. Remember, 1553 is where Servetus is executed. In November 1552, he engineered the Senate of Geneva to make a decree declaring this to be so. What prompted this proclamation was Calvinist lost his first court battle in Geneva in 1552. He tried to have Troillet punished for attacking Calvin's doctrine of predestination in the Institutes. It backfired. Calvin was ordered to stop preaching on predestination. To recoup from this defeat in a short while later, Calvin's friend Farel sponsored and passed a law in the Geneva Senate which declared that the Institutes were God's doctrine. This law further said that no one could question or criticize the Institutes any longer. So 1552, his writing is God's doctrine. And so I'll get the actual declaration, with which maybe give me the give me the declaration. Okay, we'll try to get the immediate citation for that. But yeah, 1552. Calvin's Institutes is God's doctrine. It's illegal to criticize it. And he has no power. Oh, he's not a citizen. He can't carry a sword. He's got no power. It's illegal to criticize him.
Stuff prior to this?
I don't want to say he was confused, but I think this is where he realized there has to be more distinctions made in writing. And so, for example, when he comes back in 1541, he draws up the ecclesiastical ordinances where he outlines who has power.
Oh, he forms their government when he comes back? What a powerless person.
Or of excommunication, that it's not the magistrates, it's the pastors, and there's a lot of debate over that. It's never really settled. Even through the execution of Servetus, Calvin didn't even, it was such a low point in Calvin's authority there that the magistrates wouldn't even follow his.
Here's the declaration. In the future, no one shall dare speak against that book, that is the Institutes, or against that doctrine, that is predestination. This is a declaration. It's the Geneva Little Council ruling of November 9th, 1552, according to the Jean Troillet dispute. And so, yeah, the Institutes is the gospel. Calvin is powerless.
His advice on the manner of execution.
Right.
It's like the magistrates just sticking it in his eyes. Like
you could just see how much I hate Jonathan Moorhead. What a scumbag, dirtbag he is.
Have no authority over this trial. You're not going to dictate the sentencing or.
Okay, so now he tries to portray the fact that Calvin wasn't able to get the method of execution mitigated to a lesser form of execution, and he's treating that as if the Senate is exercising authority over Calvin and trying to put Calvin in his place. He's making that up. He's pulling that out of his butt that's their motivation. Calvin has these people whipped into a frenzy. Costello writes about this, that Calvin is whipping the entire crowd, everyone in Geneva, in a frenzy over the Servetus thing and getting them all filled with this bloodlust. It doesn't seem to be this putting Calvin in his place and putting him down and trying to send a signal to Calvin that Calvin has no power. This is just the Calvinist reinterpretation of events that's favorable to them. He's making it up. It's just absolute. Where's your source, Jonathan Moorhead? You made it up.
Or even the manner of execution. So even at that point,
Yeah.
there's not a clear distinction, okay, who has power over who for these decisions.
Why did they bring him back? I mean, what changed in those years?
Elections.
Okay.
So you have new magistrates, you have new syndics. So the main four guys that are there kind of ruling the city, there's an exchange, and they realize, okay, morality, all kind of stuff, they're just going down the tubes. Calvin's a strong figure that can bring...
Oh, Calvin's a tyrant who could bring order and impose on the city moral codes and force people to comply. That's why he's brought back. So Jonathan Moorhead just contradicts himself throughout this. Calvin is powerless. He has no power. Oh, but Calvin's a strong authoritarian figure that could whip the city into shape and take it in a different path. So what Calvin does, there's a back and forth. I don't have them all translated yet, but he has conditions for his return. He gets to rewrite the government. He gets to be an inquisition force that just gets to pull anyone aside and do whatever he wants and subject them to questions. And if they lie, there's criminal trials. He throws people in jail for disagreeing with him over predestination. This is a tyrant. The guy, Jonathan Moorhead, is admitting to it here. Although he priorly tried to disclaim it. Oh, Calvin's so powerless. He's not a citizen. He is brought back to the city to whip it into moral shape. And that Calvin does. He eliminates laughter from the city. And so that might be a good, if I write a book on the Servetus trial, countering Jonathan Moorhead's claims, that might be it. Something like, and then there's no laughter in Geneva, or there's no laughter here, or no laughter anymore. The case of the Servetus trial, something like that. Calvin is there to enforce harshly, and be a tyrant, and set that city straight. And he's admitting it, and that's the conditions of return. He's not powerless. He's got massive influence. And when he wants to say, oh, I'm going to take my toys and go home, this is not, oh, I'm being defeated by my enemies around me. It's like, if you guys want me here, you're going to have to give in to any little whims I have, no matter what.
Order, discipline, let's bring him back. And so then he was invited. He didn't want to go back, though. He said he would rather go to hell than to go back to Geneva, but that he felt the call of God that still remained on him to shepherd those people.
Wow.
And so even though he didn't want to, he felt convicted that he...
Oh, so he was dramatic? Okay, look at the things Calvin says. Compare it to the character sketches that we have. Bowdoin's, his character sketch in which Calvin is highly neurotic. And so when he says things like this, where it's like, oh, he'd rather go to hell than go back to Geneva, but then he went to Geneva anyways. Like, what does that tell you about Calvin's actual character? Listen to the words that Jonathan Moorhead is saying, bounce them off against his character portrait of Calvin, and then bounce that off of the character portrait by people who actually knew Calvin and lived around Calvin and were close, intimate friends with Calvin, and what these people say about Calvin. Oh, we got Jonathan Moorhead over here, and we have like a half a dozen people who actually knew Calvin and knew him as a hothead narcissist over here. Whose word do we take? Oh no, these people, after Calvin tried to be a tyrant, run them out of Geneva, imprison them, they were anti-Calvin, so we should take what they say with a grain of salt, these people that he imprisoned and persecuted, because they had vendettas against the guy who imprisoned them and banished them and ran them out of town and tried to destroy their reputation. We can't take what they say with a grain of salt.
Go back and shepherd them. And even when he was away, one of Calvin's most significant and appreciated writings is his answer to the Cardinal Sadoleto, a Catholic, who wrote Geneva after Calvin was kicked out and tried to get them to come back to Mother Rome. And even though Calvin was kicked out and abused by Geneva, he wrote in defense of Geneva one of the most articulate letters to Sadoleto, still defending them. And so he went back to Shepherd.
Oh, what was the abuse? How was Calvin abused? You didn't tell us. You didn't tell us the specifics. Or are we just, or what are we doing and taking as evidence? Is Calvin whining that he's being abused as evidence he was abused? What specifically was he abused? Huh? Jonathan! We need answers. Okay. So I want to refer to this guy as a Munster kid. He says the Munster kid is a good minion. So the Munster kid's not asking these questions. Maybe he should.
Defending what about them?
Defending true doctrine.
Okay.
And so that was the key issue, and calling Geneva to stay true to evangelical doctrine and kind of critiquing the points that Sadoleto wrote. Because Calvin was kicked out.
Yeah.
Sadoleto saw an opening. He wrote a letter to Geneva, hey, come back. And then Calvin is then running interference.
Now, to modern American evangelical ears, it might sound weird that appeals are being made to a city about choosing to be Protestant or Roman Catholic. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so in the Reformation period, as cities are deciding in what direction are we going to take, people like William Farel would go into a city and would preach in the open square, and then the magistrates would decide, are we going to have an open debate on this? And so these guys, and Calvin was a part of one of these in Lausanne, where you would have Farel, you'd have Calvin, you could have Theodore Beza, whoever, and they're going to, in Zurich too, with Zwingli. This is what happened.
And the losers were executed? Jonathan Moorhead? Were the losers executed for heresy? Jonathan Moorhead.
Yeah.
They go and they debate, and then the people decide who wins the debate, and then it's like, okay, Catholics, you're invited to become Protestant, and if not, you're invited to leave the city. Because it actually was a security issue. It wasn't just, oh, they're mean, they're kicking us out. It's a security problem. And so that happened in all these cities where debates would take place, and then the magistrates, based on the people's voting or whatever, would decide.
Wow.
Wow.
All right, let's get back to the thread. Okay, so Servetus is writing all these letters to these guys in Geneva. He's inflaming animosity. Okay, and then what happens?
Yeah, so then he eventually publishes a couple of books on this under a false name, I can't remember that, Villanueva. And then at that point, closer to the end, before he's arrested, he's in Vienne, France, which again is about 3 hours south of Geneva, south of Lyon. And there's a man that Calvin is close to in Geneva, William de Tree, and he has a cousin in Vienne. And so William de Tree decides to write his cousin, because there's a lot of debate between Catholics and Protestants over who's pure and who's the real defenders of orthodoxy. So
Servetus, his claim in the trial is that Calvin, as Calvin often does, he uses pass-throughs. And we saw this as Calvin's behavior during the trial, where he didn't make the accusation directly. He got his cook to go make the accusation, even though he's the one who drew up the entire accusation. His cook didn't know anything about what he was accusing of. He wasn't even tracking all the arguments. Calvin's using in-betweens. And so this is Servetus's claim against Calvin. Calvin, you've already tried to murder me. You tried to murder me in Vienne. And Calvin's like, oh, no, I didn't try to do that. But I did turn over those letters at some point. Like the things that Calvin can't deny, like he admits to. It's kind of like his phrase, like, I kept silent about the mode of execution. Let people prove me wrong. Huh? I don't think there's any evidence out there anywhere that I weighed in on what form of execution or that there should be an execution, any punishment at all. No evidence exists. Ha ha! What do you got on me? We got your letters. We got your letters, Calvin. We know what you're doing there. And so Calvin likely instigated, likely had this individual write the letter on his behalf. Castillo writes that people who saw the letter thought it wasn't in the style of the guy who wrote it. It was in Calvin's style, as if like Calvin dictated to the guy what to write to his cousin, and then it's alleged that Calvin wrote a direct letter himself, which is non-existent anymore, straight to the Catholic officials. And so Servetus is in Geneva, and he's saying, hey, Calvin, you tried to kill me before. And he's a little riled up about this. He's going to use some harsh language. Calvin, who's now tried to kill Servetus 2 times, that Servetus is dealing with.
William de Tree writes his cousin in Vienne and says, oh, you right and holy Catholics, you're actually suffering a heretic in the residence of the archbishop.
And so, extra scandalous because this is Calvin's enemies. Calvin is colluding with enemies who would execute him for heresy in order to execute one of his personal enemies. That's part of the accusations against Calvin.
Michael Servetus, who has written this anti-Trinitarian work, this is a heretic. And so then the game's on. It's like, okay, who is this guy? And
so Calvin didn't initiate this.
No, he did not. It was William de Tree. Okay. And there's some debate. Was Calvin kind of getting him to write? And there's all these conspiracy theories. But
from what we know,
conspiracy theories. Because it's not like Calvin would use intermediators to get what he wants, right? It's not like we got examples of that. That's just a conspiracy theory.
From what we know, it's William de Tree taking the initiative because it's his cousin.
Yeah.
And so then investigation takes place in Vienna.
Wuhan lab leak. I'm going to get my video flagged. Wuhan lab leak. That's just a conspiracy. Conspiracy.
Servetus is arrested. His home's searched, and then they write William de Tree for primary evidence. We want these letters. And so William de Tree has to go to Calvin and try to get these letters, and Calvin initially refuses. And so de Tree writes back.
Wait, sorry, why?
Well, this is part of it. De Tree actually writes after more persuasion from Calvin, and he writes explicitly.
Yeah, he just says that it was difficult to procure these letters from Calvin. It's not explained what that difficulty is. This is more of him trying to read more into a statement than there is to without considering alternatives.
That Calvin did not want to give these letters. He prefers to...
This is more of him making up Calvin, at great risk to himself, traveled to go meet with the Servetus. And he did it through love of his own heart. Maybe... that's one way to read the evidence. The other way, which might be more natural, is it's just serendipitous that they're at the same place at the same time.
To convince heretics by doctrine rather than the sword. But with much persuasion, I have gotten these letters from him, which I am...
Yeah, so one of the accusations against Calvin is that Calvin was against executing heretics up until Servetus, and then instantly changed his mind. Did this Stalinist 1984 thing where he rewrites history, rewrites his institutes to take out his statements about tolerance for heretics, and just changes it to advocating executing of heretics. Calvin rewrites history to retroactively justify his own actions. He writes a book about it. He writes a book defending himself and justifying himself. Rewrites history to complement it. So Castillo points this out. And so in Castillo's On Heretics, if they should be punished, his first work that came out almost simultaneously with John Calvin's defense of his own actions, he actually uses Calvin as some of his references for people who are against executing heretics. So it's a really funny situation, which Calvin's words are being used against him in reference to executing it. It's not as Jonathan Moorhead claims. Oh, executing heretics was just commonplace. It's everyone's doing it. Oh yeah, there's only one guy executed for heresy, Servetus. Scumbag.
I'm sending to you now.
I'm sorry to stop you and ask you so many questions. I'm pretty ignorant, so I want to try to understand as much of this as possible. When he's arrested in Vienna, right? Named after their favorite diagram? No, sorry. When he's thanks for that laugh, man. I'll take it. When he's arrested, it's by the magistrate.
Yes.
The civil magistrate, which is being run by essentially the Roman Catholic. I mean, they're Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
They're committed to Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, and you have levels of Inquisition.
Right.
You know.
But basically, the Roman Catholics are the one who's kind of doing. They initiate their Servetus thing. They get it popping.
And that's That's very important.
Yeah.
That's a very important point. One of the major points.
Is it a major point? The Calvinists would kill John Calvin. Or not the Calvinists. The Catholics would kill John Calvin. And so let's see what he says about it. And we'll see if he's just making up things again, just telling lies.
I think for why Servetus is eventually executed is the Catholics that first arrest him. They get the evidence, a trial. Servetus is caught lying on multiple levels. But what happens, despite that, is because he's a physician, he has a little bit more clout, he has a little bit more freedom in his imprisonment to go relieve himself out in the garden in the middle of the night. So he takes advantage of that in his bathrobe in the middle of the night to use the restroom to jump the fence, and he escapes. And so after he escapes,
that seems fair. I don't know about the bathrobe part. That might be just him adding a little flair. But he escapes in the middle of the night from the Catholics and then flees and eventually lands in Geneva.
Is convicted of the crime, and the punishment is burning by slow fire until his body is reduced to cinder, and not only that, but bales of his books. And so he's burned in effigy, essentially.
Oh, so this happens when he's not been caught yet.
Yep. So he's escaped. Well, he escaped.
Right.
And then the ruling comes down. He is to be burned in effigy.
In absentia.
Yeah, which that takes place.
Wait, okay, so I'm just trying to set the scene. So what, they just go out to like this post and they put like a scarecrow dummy essentially up there, and they burn him as they kind of recite
Visual
the charges
representation.
Yep. And who, like, do the villagers gather around this, or what?
I suppose so.
Okay.
Yeah, who doesn't want to miss a good
burning
effigy burning,
yeah.
right? With books.
Okay, but he's on the run during this time.
He's on the run,
and I'm assuming he's hearing like, oh, they burned. They're going to burn me.
Yeah, word does spread. It spreads to Geneva even. And that's kind of the question. Why does he go north? Because his story was he wants to go to Naples, but he ends up in Geneva. That's still a debate today. Like, what was the purpose? Why did he go to Geneva? Did he have a death wish? Did he want to subvert Calvin and take his place? Did he want to convince Calvin and then he kind of wins the day?
Yeah.
Or was he working with the libertines who were in control of Geneva at the time that hated Calvin to...
He's working with the libertine. Okay, yeah, sure. That's plausible.
to just ruin Calvin's reputation and things. So
what,
we don't know.
What do you? I mean, as you've sifted through the data, are you inclined towards one view or another?
That's difficult to say. You know, I tend to think that he did kind of have a death wish. He even writes in his letters, like, I know I'm going to die.
So there's one letter, and he does state that he thinks he's going to die. He's condemned to death. All the accounts are unanimous in that he doesn't want to die. This Jonathan Moorhead guy just is telling us about how Servetus wants to die. He'll be telling us in a second how Servetus is begging on hands and knees not to be sent back to Vied. And so Servetus doesn't want to die. Servetus thinks it's a possibility. Servetus is like a romantic at heart. He's kind of, I think he's like a Redditor, and so he's a little neurotic as well. And so him and Calvin are maybe too much like each other. Calvin, that's maybe the reason Calvin hates him so much, because he's seen himself look back at him, and he can't stand dealing with the second one of himself. Narcissistic, abusive, very, very intelligent in the way that he can argue and put together arguments, very clever, but very bad-natured. And so Servetus doesn't want to die, even though he might say, "Oh, I think I'm going to die for this," or whatever. That it's like he's just being dramatic
on account of this.
It's not clear. David writes, Servetus thought he could reason with Calvin. When he's writing the initial letters, he might think that he could convert Calvin. I don't think he goes to Geneva to convert Calvin. I don't think that's a possibility in his mind.
War, and he's quoting a lot of the book of Revelation and martyrdom and things. But I still think, maybe he knows he's going to die, but
All right, so the Servetus letter that I'm referencing should be in Volume 2, Letters. And Servetus to the Senate of Geneva. Oh, let's go look at that real quick. Servetus is boots on ground while this trial's happening. He knows what's happening. It's not Jonathan Moorhead telling us all about what's happening. Nearly 3 weeks I've been held in this prison on this accusation, my lords. Nothing has been proved against me that deserves death or any severe punishment. He's like, you guys haven't proved anything death-worthy in me. He doesn't want to die. It says, consider my condition. I'm detained. Okay. I've been treated not as an accused man awaiting judgment, but as though I have already been condemned. Oh, that kind of matches Costello's argument. His contention that not Costello, but Balsic, his contention that this was a fixed event. Before they sent the letters out, they had already condemned him in their mind. Kind of fits that narrative. Humbly petition that justice be done. This is not the one where he blames Calvin. We'll go try to find a Servetus letter. I think it's got to be in this. Well, that wasn't going to be the one where he talks about dying anyways. He's writing to... Oh, man. Maybe it's in Volume 1. Maybe it's in Volume 1. I'll have to go look at Volume 1. All right, I'll go look at Volume 1. We'll let these guys play.
He wants to give his best shot at convincing the theologian of the Reformation who wrote the theological monument of the Reformation. That's John Calvin. And so even Servetus, is the way he titles his work, the Institutio, it very similarly mirrors the Institutes.
Yeah.
So parts of me thinks he's wanting to truly convince Calvin, but maybe deep down he knows that he's going to pay for it with his life.
This feels like other things that I've seen in history. Like you think about like Charles Godot and his obsession with the president, I think Garfield, that he ended up shooting.
Yeah.
It seems like oftentimes people who are a little off their rocker become obsessed with one.
Well, there's two people off their rocker. Okay, so here's the letter. This is a letter from Servetus. Oh, I just pulled up the wrong one again. They're all overlapping on each other. Volume 3, Volume 1. Okay, Volume 1. This is his letter to Abel Popin, minister at Geneva. I know for certain that for this reason I must die. And so basically it's a seduction of the world. There's going to be a battle, revelation, apocalypticism. And so this might be where our guy from the previous episode is saying he's apocalyptic. He's going to try to get himself killed. I do not believe that's the case. There's no indication of that. He does say that I know for this reason I must die, and that I'm not faint-hearted, that I might become a disciple like the teacher. And so this is well into the trial as well. So it's not like his reason for coming to Geneva or anything like that. And so that's a clear imposition on someone who's just trying to run cover for... this guy does it too. Jonathan Moorhead does it too. It's like... This guy begged for Geneva to kill him. He said that maybe he does it coming up real quickly, though. But they're like inventing excuses that are not evident or rational conclusions from the documents in order to give any reason, no matter how silly or implausible or how much they don't support the case, reasons why Servetus deserved this death.
In person.
Yeah.
And they just sort of manically focus on them, and even when he knows, like, if I go to Geneva I'm going to die, they just do it anyways.
Yeah, and even during the trial it's like he's constantly berating Calvin. And so I think there's a lot of truth to that. So
does he hang out for a little while?
Okay, so there's one of his statements about berating Calvin. The guy who's trying to kill him, the guy who previously tried to kill him, he's berating. Calvin berates back. Jonathan Moorhead does not mention this, does not talk about Calvin's bad behavior, Calvin being arrogant, Calvin being vitriolic, Calvin, his rage, his anger that's evident in the trial documents and within his letters. He doesn't talk about these things. It's all one side. This is one of these lies by omission.
And then go to Geneva, or does he, as soon as he escaped, make his way up to Geneva?
I think there's several weeks that transpire as he's working his way up, and he's outside the city. But eventually, on a Sunday, he attends a service at La Madeleine, which is one of the four churches. You have St. Pierre at the top of Old Town, and then you go into Low Town, the lower part of the town, right by Lake Geneva, Lac Léman, and you have La Madeleine. And so services take place, catechism every Sunday at noon. There's afternoon services there. So he attends an afternoon service and is recognized.
So let's think about polemically what's happening here. And so Jonathan Moorhead, he's not in this interview to inform. He's here to give Calvinist talking points. So the host, we skipped through that part, but the host is like, yeah, I'm talking to atheists. And then they'll say, well, John Calvin killed Servetus. And he's like, oh, we don't have any talking points to respond to that. Jonathan Moorhead's here to give them talking points, give them things to say, quick comebacks in order to diffuse these situations. So he's not here to teach history. He's here to teach rhetorical tricks. And so he's purposely, I think dishonestly and intentionally misrepresenting the situation, such as, oh, Calvin being powerless. And so right here, this is when the host pushed back. He's like, wait a minute, I thought you said he was powerless.
By men that knew who he was. And it was reported to Calvin, and then Calvin ordered him to be arrested, because it was known what was going on. It was known that he is breaking imperial law by his doctrines, by his publications. And so if Calvin did not report him, that comes back on him. He's then liable. Yeah,
I'm trying to put myself in Calvin's shoes. I mean, a guy is bringing big trouble to the city of Geneva that I'm trying to pastor, that I'm trying to bring Reformation to.
He's silent. He's arrested in disguise, and then he's pulled into front of court. Not big trouble.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably make the same decision. But a little pushback. Earlier you said not a citizen, doesn't really have any control, can't even carry an armed weapon, can't even carry a weapon. And now you're saying he was able to order his arrest. What am I missing?
Maybe order's a strong word. Reported him so that he would be arrested.
Oh, see, now he's minimizing again. So the host finally pushes back and says, you said he's powerless. He had the guy arrested. And this guy, all the statements of Calvin admits that he's the primary instigator over and over again. And he downplays that. He doesn't mention these passages. He doesn't talk about Calvin admitting his own involvement. He doesn't explain Calvin's detailed involvement, writing up like the 30 points of accusation, writing all the back and forth, being basically the primary prosecutor of Servetus. He doesn't mention all these things. Because he's dishonest. He's misleading. The host misunderstands Calvin's role. And everyone at the time knew Calvin's role. Everyone at the time blamed Calvin and Calvin alone, not the government at the time. They all saw that as Calvin. So Jonathan Moorhead's trying to rewrite history in an opposite way of the people of the time, how they understood it.
Okay, well, that matters. You see, it's, that language made it sound like he was the one who made it happen. Okay. So he reported him, and then he's arrested.
See, he's playing off. Oh, Calvin's not the one who made it happen. Calvin is the accuser. Calvin is the accuser.
Yep.
Now, again, I'm slow. Just like sometimes I'll put in Chat GPT. I'll say, explain this to me like I'm an 8-year-old. That's what I need you to do for me now. He was arrested and charged by essentially like the Roman Catholics, but now he's in a Protestant magisterium. Why are they arresting him?
All right, here's another lie coming up. John Moorhead's going to lie. We've already read, everyone, you and I, we've read together these accusations against Calvin, and one of them is that he's executing someone who was peaceable in their own province for crimes they did not commit while in the territory. This is, at the time, accusation within months of the execution of Servetus, he's being called out for this extrajudicial killing of someone without jurisdiction. And let's see what Jonathan Moorhead responds to this.
I mean, I don't see, like, I'm thinking about like the 90s movies, like, you don't have jurisdiction here. Like, why would they arrest somebody who was under charges from a different entity?
This is a very good question from the host. Jonathan Moorhead just lies.
It's still under imperial law. And so,
Okay, explain that.
Oh, John Calvin thought he was under imperial law. So if you if you go to the trial documents and you go to Justinian law, which he might be referencing. Number one, Justinian law does not have death execution for anti-Trinitarians. There are some specific heresies that it does prescribe death for, but John Calvin disclaims Justinian law, and Servetus points this out. I believe it's in volume 1, the trial documents. It's like, you're not prosecuting me under Justinian law. You guys don't even agree with Justinian law. There's no crimes for which I'm being punished. There's no codified law that I'm being accused against. This is just ad hoc enforcing of individual whims, John Calvin's whims. Whatever John Calvin calls heresy, whatever John Calvin says is the punishment for heresy, that's what's being prosecuted here. This is not codified.
That to me.
And so you go back to Code of Justinian. There's the Carolingian law, which is Charlemagne French law. There are certain diets, like the diet of Spire.
So that's why the book, Did Calvin Murder Servetus? That one's actually pretty important, because that's actually written by a lawyer. And he actually goes through these arguments to see what's actually a crime. Is blasphemy a crime? Is heresy a crime? How's heresy different from blasphemy? And remember that Calvin's people who are on Calvin's side criticized Calvin for not executing Servetus under blasphemy laws, but rather under heresy laws, because it's more justifiable for a blasphemy execution than it is for a heresy execution. And so these people at the time know these laws, and they know the implications. Jonathan Moorhead doesn't. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's making up Calvinist talking points without any evidence. So show me what law that Servetus was prosecuted under that prescribed the punishment of death. Jonathan Moorhead, do it.
1529, which is affirmed by Augsburg, which then is confirmed, I think, 1532 by Regensburg. And so these laws are being affirmed that what's punishable by death is anabaptism, because a variety of reasons. There's over 40 different sects of Anabaptism. There's the moderates like Menno Simmons. There's the Utopians,
crazy ones,
the Utopians,
locking people in cages,
Munzer,
instituting
and then
polygamy.
there's the rational Anabaptists like Servetus, the anti-Trinitarians. But for the reformers like Calvin and Luther, I think they all kind of lump them together in the Utopians.
And remember, there's only one person executed in Geneva for heresy, and it is Servetus. And so, obviously, this is not a real law. It's not enforced. No one dies. Calvin is out there. Remember, Calvin is out there defending homosexual pedophiles who engage in statutory rape of young men. He's saying these people shouldn't die. But Servetus wrote a book. And Servetus was insulting during trial. And he said bad things about the things I believe. So death penalty for that guy. Pedophiles, yeah, you guys got to get it's not doing pretty good for the charges that when John Calvin defends pedophiles, it's not looking so good for the charges that Calvin himself might have been a pedophile. I'm just throwing that out there as an inflammatory boosting of various Calvin rumors that existed at the time of Calvin's life.
Which is very dangerous. And so, they need to be eliminated. That's what they believe, because they could be a danger to society. So that's punishable by death, but also anti-Trinitarianism is punishable by death, even going back to the mid-6th century. And
is this because essentially Europe during this time, these various city-states, they're all still kind of under the like Holy Roman Empire statutes? Is that still a thing?
Yeah, that's part of the Code of Justinian that's
Okay.
going to keep going through. That's then reaffirmed by these diets, but I would say it's not just law, but there is theology and intertwined in here. So, for example, why are the Anabaptists drowned in Zurich? Why is Zwingli doing this? Well, it is a theological issue, because if you're going to put the church and the state together,
Right.
and that's consistent with their theology, right, that the church and state are together, to refuse infant baptism is to refuse the state, because that's how you enter the church, is through infant baptism. So if you're
Yeah, yeah. Servetus is like executed, and one of the charges is like infant baptism, and it's like not even part of the trial. It's just like just an extra charge, like throw it in there. But I was going to make a comment about Justinian. He had married a prostitute whore actress who's just the most evil person in history. It's like there's a very interesting podcast that I'll get the name of, and I'll share that if people want to learn history about an evil man and his evil wife.
entering the church through infant baptism, you're entering the state through infant baptism. So therefore, to reject that is to reject the state, and to reject the state is treason, and treason is punishable by death. And so you see that there's the theology and the politics
Yeah.
all kind of going together.
So the Protestant magisterium was more than happy to arrest and execute an anti-Trinitarian heretic, regardless of whatever charges he was brought under in France.
Yeah, so this is the conclusion the host has been brought to by this liar, misrepresenter, Jonathan Moorhead. This is where he's at. So now Jonathan Moorhead has to walk his framing backwards, or else he's going to be caught in an outright lie.
I wouldn't say they were happy about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, and this is part of the story where you kind of pull back and look at all the people that came through Geneva. Because one of the things that you observe as you look at all the evidence is there were anti-Trinitarians that came in and out of Geneva all the time. In Basel, Servetus was in Basel with Oecolampadius. He even lived in his house with him for a while.
All these Trinitarians, they're such great buddies. They're always hanging out. They're just transferred. It's only Servetus. Oh, so heresy wasn't like a real crime then, was it? Was it Jonathan Moorhead? They're just all buddy with all the heretics transitioning through. And Servetus complains, you guys treat Muslims better than me. Castillo writes, you guys publish the Quran. You guys allow Muslims to transfer through the country. You treat them better than you did a fellow Christian who proclaims Christ. You killed that guy, but you'll allow you'll print Qurans. You'll allow Muslims to transition through. It's like there's not a principled stance that Geneva's taking here. These are not principled people.
Well, he knew he was heretical, but he was young. Other cities as well, that he's going at Strasbourg. And so the question becomes, if this is imperial law, why isn't it not uniformly upheld in every city, in every case? And so that's why I think there are other factors that have to be in play, because before Servetus and after Servetus, anti-Trinitarians, Anabaptists were in and out of Geneva. Calvin would meet with them, he would discuss with them, he would debate with them, he would plead with them, he would love them.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, they would either leave or be...
Yeah, the podcast name, it might be Justinian and Theodora, The Secret History. And so go take a look at that.
Be asked to leave. Servetus is the only one executed in Geneva during the tenure of Calvin there. The question is, why? Why him? And so that's where I think you have to go back to other issues at play. Two primary that I would say. Number one is everybody knew the Catholics had condemned him to death. And so then there's all this pressure.
This guy's a liar. This is just part of his lies, misrepresenting and misframing. There's no evidence for this claim coming up.
On the magistrates of Geneva, this high and holy city on a hill, will they suffer a heretic to live? These high and holy and pure.
Where is your source material for this claim, you liar? So you could go look at the letters. You could just pull up to see what the Catholic concerns are. The people are concerned that if they start executing heretics, like they lose their moral authority in condemning the Catholics from executing heretics. This is the consideration. They're also getting bad-mouthed because Servetus exists in the first place. And it's not that whether or not they execute him. It's just that Protestantism breeds sectism, a different sects of people. It's not about the execution in this case as well. What he's trying to do is he's trying to frame the thing as everybody knows you should execute heretics, and so the Catholics are watching and saying, let's see if you execute this guy as you should. That's not what's happening. People are worried. They're worried. It's like, if we execute this guy, these Catholics are going to be like, you guys have no right to complain anymore about our execution of you guys. None. You guys lost your moral authority. That's what's happening here. Jonathan Moorhead is lying.
Protestants, or will they exact justice and uphold imperial law? And so all of Europe is watching the magic.
So it's like, where are you getting this? Where is that coming from? What letters out there where these concerns are actually being floated by Catholics, by Protestants? You're making up. This is part of the Calvinist ridiculous reframing, trying to grab any frame they can that portrays them in a positive light, no matter how removed from reality that frame is. Where's your source for this?
Magistrates, what will they do? And so the magistrates had the pressure from the Catholics on the one hand, the libertines on the other.
I got like every reference to Servetus in the Calvinist letters. I got basically every single one translated. You could go look in the letters, see if this guy's lying, see if he's just making things up, if he's reframing for rhetorical purposes to rehabilitate this criminal, this narcissist John Calvin.
Other in Geneva that were just kind of living licentiously, that you live however you want. So they didn't want to side with them either. And so that's one part of the story. They had to uphold the law, because another part of this is there could really be a crusade called for by the Pope against Geneva because of something.
I remember that crusade where the Crusaders stormed Geneva and took over, and their Knights of the Holy Cross, the Knights Templar invaded Geneva. It didn't happen. And so he's making up fake concerns. Sure, the Pope might have said something about Crusade Geneva at some point. It's not like real things. He's just saying anything he can to try to mitigate Geneva's culpability. He just got called out on Servetus being the only heretic executed, which destroys his narrative that heresy was an executable crime. It just wasn't. And so it's this reframing, these ridiculous weird things. So it's only Servetus that the Catholics were waiting for. Like, oh, is he going to execute this heretic? That's the only heretic that they were doing that for. Not all those other ones you described transitioning through unmolested in Geneva. You see, his story doesn't make sense with basic scrutiny. It doesn't. He's got no sources. He's got no evidence. It's not coherent with the other parts of the story that he's telling. And so the most consistent narrative is Costello's claim that you get killed in Geneva for insulting John Calvin. That's the ultimate sin. It's not heresy. It's, if you're calling Calvin out publicly, and viciously to his face, refuting him, if you're pulling out the Bible, refuting his biblical interpretation with your own biblical interpretation, calling him out, you're making an enemy of Calvin, he will kill you. That's the Costello reading. That's my reading. That's the most consistent narrative with this one heretic death. 2, if you're counting this other guy who also got on Calvin's bad side.
Like this. And the Pope had preached crusades against Geneva before.
Really?
And so it could have been done.
Pascal says, so cool how you could just make up whatever history you want. Maybe Calvinist history is like black history. You could just make up whatever history you want. It's whatever it's all true.
Based on that. I mean, any excuse that you can use to call a crusade against a Protestant city like Geneva with a figure like John Calvin. Yeah. So there's that pressure. So that's, I think, the most significant one, the pressure that all of Europe knew.
Okay.
And there's letters that talk about stuff like this.
Where?
What would the Catholics think?
Yeah. If we execute him, what would they think about us? We lose our moral authority. That's what the letters say. So quote some sources, pull them out. Let's see if I got them labeled. I tried to label these letters, like the major letters with some sort of like quick snippets that people could, look, there's people arguing against execution. There's people arguing for imprisonment. Oh man, I thought execution was just like a natural thing. Burns secretly desired execution. There's Haler to Bullinger talking about this, but they didn't put it in their official documents. Oh, why is that? It's probably because they don't want to be associated with executing heretics, that they didn't put anything in their official responses. And Jonathan Moorhead lies about this. He says, oh, they all said execute. They didn't. None of them, absolutely zero of them did. All right, I'll keep rolling. Calvin resolves to write a defense. Let's see. Okay. Musculus to Bullinger. Servetus should have been executed for blasphemy, not heresy. That's an interesting letter. We got Calvin learning about a book against him. Instantly it blows up. It's a scandal. Almost instantly. Things are circulating. Calvin tries damage control. Calvin complaining that people think he's solely responsible. Everyone thinks it. Betza reads Castilla's book. It's here somewhere. Jerome blames Calvin for the execution. And that's Jerome Balsek. So Calvin keeps arguing. Hey, he's like, hey, the people who say that I killed Servetus, remember you had hand in it too? So they're actually, when they criticize me for killing Servetus, they're actually criticizing you. He's like really into this damage control, sharing culpability. We got the possibly forged letter. That Castillo, who's a scholar, he's defending himself against charges, and then he dies in the middle of like what's a quasi heresy trial. And then what? Bullinger and Betza, they celebrate his death. This man who advocates peace, and who spends his life in study and meditation, in poverty. They celebrate his death. Why? Because he dares criticize Calvin on executing Servetus and on doctrines of predestination. So I don't have it labeled here, but it exists. And so he's making this up.
Melanchthon talked about that and others. Aleander, who's a Catholic, talked about those. But then the second major issue is not just his heresy, but his obstinate heresy. That's another thing. If you're not teachable, if you're somewhat off kilter and you're a danger to yourself, you could be a danger to others. I mean, you can read the minutes of the trial that's published in English, and Servetus is just insult after insult after insult against the magistrates, but primarily against Calvin. And so
he confuses the host. The host, he's like, oh man, I thought Calvin had nothing to do with this trial. Why the heck is he insulting Calvin? Watch it. Because Jonathan Moorhead is lying and misrepresenting, the host is confused because he's believing and absorbing what Jonathan Moorhead has claimed. Because he's a liar. Jonathan Moorhead's a liar. He's misrepresented it, and so he's confused. Watch this.
One of the things you never want to be called as a pastor today or back then is Simon Magus. Like, he is the Darth Vader of church history, right?
Okay.
So, you think of Acts 8, the sorcerer.
Uh-huh.
And so over 25 times in the trial, Servetus is calling Calvin.
The host is just trying to put these two and two together. He's not tracking. It's like, what kind of legal defense is this? What does Calvin have to do with any of this? Why is Calvin getting insulted? What's happening here? The host is confused because Moorhead's a liar.
The sorcerer.
Why does he
Simon
call him
Magus.
that? What's the?
Because he's the ultimate bad guy. He's the ultimate deceiver, the sorcerer.
Okay.
And so this is a guy that knows he's on trial for his life, and he's accusing the most prominent pastor in the.
Oh, the most prominent pastor. I thought he was powerless and had nothing to do with the trial. Now he's accusing the most prominent pastor, and as a result, that puts his life in danger? Is this now your claim, Jonathan Moorhead? Doesn't that contradict all the things that you've already said? If Calvin's out of favor, insulting Calvin should be to Servetus's benefit. But he's portraying it as that, and this is actually true, that Servetus insulting John Calvin put Servetus's life on risk and actually gets him executed. That's what he's actually describing right now. A thing that he had denied not long ago, that Calvin had nothing to do with this. Calvin's not prominent. Calvin has no power. Now he's tacitly admitting that insulting Calvin at trial is going to get you executed.
In the town, and he's calling the magistrates all kind of horrible names too, like monsters and things. Oh,
then he threw in some look, this is like his damage control. I think he knows what's going on, how his mask is a little bit slipping, and so he does this little damage control. Oh, he was also insulting the magistrates too a little bit, and because he realizes that playing into the Calvin angle contradicts his previous claims, and his purposeful misrepresentation of what happened at trial, who's involved in trial, Calvin's role and responsibility, and what Calvin has admitted in multiple times, multiple places, and what everyone knows at the time. Every single person knows it.
And so that's part of what I put in the book, is just to catalog all the things that he's saying, knowing that his life's on the line. So all that to say, he is.
Yeah, and we read out a list last time of all the insults that John Calvin, who's not in prison, he's not in fear of his life, he's not responding to someone who tried to kill him. All the insults that John Calvin was throwing out and tossing out. Servetus, who's in fear for his life, interacting with an accuser who's tried to kill him multiple times, is not very dignified. I made a meme about this because these Calvinists, they think that this is like an argument. They think that like they're actually making a point when they do this. So I posted it on God is Open. Let's try to pull that up. Facebook has gotten real bad with searching for things. Here's one right here. Calvin murdered Servetus. This is a hipster Calvinist. Calvin murdered Servetus, but would you change your mind if you learned that Servetus lacked decorum towards Calvin after Calvin imprisoned and tried to kill him? Yeah, this is like their actual argument. Like, it's unhinged. So Jonathan Moorhead is not like making sane, rational arguments. He's not like contextualizing, and he's making insane arguments for Calvin in Calvin's defense for killing Servetus. Like it would not fly. It's like, well, what did you say? What was my next one? Let me pull up that next one as well. After Calvin had death pronounced on Servetus, Servetus argues that Calvin should be executed instead. So really, Servetus was endorsing his own execution for heresy. Like, these are the arguments these people make. It's insane. And so that's why we started with the quote tonight about Calvinists and their perception of self. Like, these people are incredibly self-absorbed. It's like they're in this cult mentality where it's like any argument that they can make to justify anything, any combination of words, and we've talked about this before, and Calvinists are social justice warriors. Any combination of words that they could throw together to make you do what they want, that's the combination of words that they're going to choose. These are not real arguments. Servetus deserved death because he was abusive during the trial. And he doesn't mention Calvin's abuse. We read Calvin's abuse last time on our last Servetus podcast. Calvin was abusive. And then Calvin says, "Oh, I was gentle and I was humble." Like, you got what you wrote. You're actually abusive. You're just a narcissist. And so when you're abusing others, it doesn't register as abuse. It registers in your mind as, oh, this is justice. This is deserved. This is just truth that I'm saying, because it doesn't register as abuse, because He's like a narcissist. He sees himself as God. Remember, we read the quote. I think we read the quote. I'll pull the quote up. It's in that response to Bowden, where he says that all his enemies are enemies of Christ. The man's insane. The man is like literally insane.
He's an obstinate heretic, and also all of Europe knew that he was condemned by the Catholics. Would the Protestants uphold the law?
So they arrest him. They put him on trial. How long does the trial last?
So he's arrested 13 August, 1553, and he's burned October 27, I think, of the same year.
Okay, so not long.
Yeah, not long. And trials didn't last very long at that time, and they really didn't like to put people in prison. They wouldn't really have a concept of...
Yeah, here's the quote. And so this is Calvin responding to Bowden. And so, of course, the nut of the great and difficulty question is solved. How I dared provoke Bowden when I have so many enemies, for my defense is ready at hand. However many enemies I have, they are professed enemies of Christ. Every single one of his enemies just happens to be enemy of Christ. Opposing Calvin is opposing God. Like the man's an insane narcissist. Okay, let's try to get our screen back up.
Long-term imprisonment like we do today.
Yeah. Either flog him or kill him or let him go.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be a really silly question. I wish there was someone more knowledgeable, more intelligent to be here, but you got me, buddy. So maybe that'll be helpful for people. I'm going to ask all the dumb questions that maybe they're thinking of. Does he have any kind of representation at this trial? Anyone there to defend him?
That's a good question.
Well, that's part of the controversial part is that he was ruled that not to have a defendant, but what Calvin did was...
Wait, sorry, what do you mean?
Like a defendant, someone to defend him or represent.
He's a stranger in a foreign country. He's picked off the street. He's a transient. He's picked off the street, thrown in jail, thrown through the legal system without representation as to how the legal system even works. He's denied legal representation. And this is in the minutes. And he complains about this. The argument of the government official prosecutor is, yeah, this guy's clever enough. He could defend himself, and so that's the argument that they give. That the Senate or the judges seem to have bought off on, and so there's a little truth to what this guy says next. That heretics just don't get representation, but that points to what Costello and Servetus have already claimed, that this was a prejudged trial. This is not a legitimate execution of justice. This was prejudgment. They've already accused you of being a heretic. They've already judged you to be a heretic, so they're denying you legal representation due to the fact that you're the heretic that they're trying you for.
They said he can't have it.
Right.
Why?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I can't remember. But it's one of those things. It's almost like, if I were to guess, it's kind of like what John Huss experienced in Constance in 1415, that for a heretic, you don't necessarily have to provide them with all the comforts and
Yeah, that's fairly accurate. His memory is not wrong. So you just go look at the prosecutor responding to Servetus's request to have a defense attorney.
Sure.
Of someone who's considered orthodox.
He's a heretic. He doesn't have the same rights.
Yeah, you don't have. Well, for the Catholics, it's like he's a heretic, John Huss, and so you don't have to keep your promise to a heretic because he was promised safe conduct to Constance.
Right, yeah.
But for Servetus, he's not an idiot. Like, he's a smart guy. He's a polymath, and so Calvin literally took his own books to the prison behind. It's the bishop's prison right behind the church. The hole is there today. You can see where he was in prison.
So yeah, Servetus was given access to a lot of literature in order to defend himself, to pull his references, get some sources. But he's in a dark, cold cell. He doesn't have clothes. He's freezing. He's covered with lice and mice and rodents. While Calvin is living in luxury, has a team of scholars pouring through Servetus's works and building a defense against him, all the while preaching public sermons against him. While Servetus has no public voice, he's not allowed any visitors who are not prominent. These are part of the accusations against Calvin. against Calvin, not the city of Geneva, not the government of Geneva. These are the accusations against Calvin. Everyone knows Calvin's doing this. Calvin's behind this all. Servetus knows this. This is directly Servetus's claim. The guy who literally dies is blaming Calvin. It maybe if Servetus had access to Jonathan Moorhead could explain to Servetus, no, it's not actually Calvin doing this. Calvin's just a minor role in this, and Calvin doesn't have he's not a citizen. Did you know, Servetus? Servetus, did you know that Calvin's not a citizen? Maybe Jonathan Moorhead can explain that to Servetus if he was back in that time frame.
Brought him his own books so he could study the fathers and whatever else, so that he could make his own defense.
Wow.
And you can read those minutes too, like what Servetus responded to the accusations. And so the magistrates asked Calvin to produce lines of evidence against Servetus, and so there were 38 lines.
38 lines.
So Josh says this guy thinks that John Huss being burned was just, not necessarily, I think he was just talking about the principle of you don't owe anything to heretics. He was saying that principle carries over to the Servetus case per the cultural milieu at the time.
Sorry, I don't want to forget.
Yep.
You said he went to him and he took books. Didn't he also go to him in private and plead for him apart from the trial?
Yeah. There's I think at least 2 instances of that. So he's during the trial, and then particularly at the end, that he's pleading with him to recant, and so that he can restore him to the church.
So Calvin writes up the charges. We're finally seeing that here's some involvement from Calvin. 38 lines.
So it's very interesting in Castillo's response. So Castillo goes through Calvin's defense of himself. Remember, Calvin publishes a book trying to defend his image because he knows everyone blames him and him alone, and they're accusing him of murder and being bloodthirsty. Calvin publishes this book, and Castillo publishes like a line-by-line response, and then he calls Calvin out on these various issues. So like these little lines, it's very interesting to see Calvin say, "Oh, I was very magnanimous. I was very good," and Castillo is just calling him out over it. But I don't know if I should go grab some of those references, but it's interesting to see the take apart. These people have never seen these responses. They take Calvin's word for everything, and they treat his word like gospel, like a good Calvinist, right? If you don't treat Calvin's word like gospel, you are kicked out of the community. Calvin is God.
As you said?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's in those 38 lines?
Well, it's weird things that he's writing his book. Some of them strange interpretations of things, but so the anti-Trinitarianism is a big one.
Right.
He didn't believe in justification by faith. He's an Anabaptist. He believed like you couldn't commit a mortal sin until you were 20 years of age. And so it's kind of like a weird mixture of all kinds of things. Yeah.
It's a goulash of heresy and heterodoxy.
In Russian, you'd say it's a kasha. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Porridge.
Okay,
Yep.
And that's how the trial begins. That is being read out. These are the charges.
Yep. And so he's given books to defend himself, and this takes place in the courtroom.
And I mean, this is like Law and Order. Like, there's a judge. There's one judge. Is there like a tribunal? If so, like who is it composed of?
Yeah. So there's several guys named. Like, there's a lieutenant. There's an assistant lieutenant. What's interesting is a lot of people that were in charge of the trial were opponents of Calvin, couldn't stand Calvin.
Okay.
And so this is why, again, outside of 1538, when he was kicked out of the city, this is the second most lowest point in Calvin's time there, where he had so many opponents that wanted to see him humiliated.
Yeah.
He had no authority. He thought he was going to be kicked out of the city. He offered to resign in 1553, actually during the trial. A lot of people don't know this. He preached a farewell sermon, thinking he was going to be kicked out of the city again from Acts 20. And so for people to think that he controlled the whole trial, and it's like could be farthest from the truth.
Oh, yeah. So pulling this up. This is Calvin, and this is Costello responding line by line to Calvin in Calvin's defense of himself, and it'll show you kind of what underhanded methods Calvin uses. So, like, Calvin describes meeting with him after, like, he's condemned, and he records that Servetus asks for forgiveness or pardon from Calvin, but he doesn't actually give details. It's part of this Calvinist thing where you lie by omission. And Costello pulls this out and points this out to him. He says, I was expecting him to confess what you had said a little before, namely that you had devoted your private effort to healing him. He confessed no such thing. Like Servetus doesn't agree that, Calvin was so generous and magnanimous or whatever. He confesses no such thing, and you are mocking us and not fulfilling what you promised. Asking pardon and confessing those things are not the same. And so he's saying you conceal it craftily. I'll tell you what this was about. Servetus was somewhat prone to anger. When he fell into the hands of Calvin, a man of extreme anger, and had been treated by him so unjustly in chains, he was so exasperated that he said many things against him more angrily than Christianly. What Calvin answered to these things, those who were not present may infer from his writings and sermons. He's saying, like, we know who Calvin's character is. You just have to read what Calvin writes. We know how Calvin responds. Calvin is a man of extreme anger, which he delivered against him through the whole time. So those sermons seem to be available that Costello had access to. And these sermons that Calvin was preaching publicly against Servetus were vicious. That's what's being reported here. And for some reason, we don't have these sermons anymore. Yeah, so maybe they're hiding those sermons. Maybe they got rid of them from the evidence from the Calvinist coffers because they look bad on Calvin. Maybe. Therefore, after Servetus saw that death was near, he began to think about rendering account to God. Because he had spoken too intemperately, he asked pardon from Calvin, not on the account of doctrine. So he's saying Calvin is kind of representing this as like he's asking pardon about doctrine and theology. He's not doing that at all. And we see Servetus up to the moment of his death not recanting his theology at all. He's a true believer of his theology. The pardon is for being so vitriolic towards Calvin. That's what he's asking for. But Calvin doesn't point this out. Calvin doesn't write about this. Calvin lies through omission. He doesn't say what this pardon and forgiveness is about. Costello calls him out on it. Servetus, condemned to death, asked pardon from Calvin, his condemner. Calvin granted pardon to Servetus, but not in life or death, as this whole book, written against him in an accusatory manner, shows, along with his sermons and the fact that he so bitterly persecutes in words, deeds, and writings those who dare to pity Servetus's life. Behold the shepherd of Christ's sheep, who lays down his life for his sheep. Behold the Christian man who does not allow the sun to go down upon his anger. Yeah. Calvin is a really bad person. And so, like all this like fake whining, Calvin has no power, he doesn't control things. What's your evidence for this?
He wasn't in control of anything. He couldn't control even the manner of execution at the end.
Wow. So is there a jury in the trial?
That's a good question. I have to go back and look. I can't remember if it's the main judge and lieutenant, but there would be a group that decided because there was a sentence written out. But part of this jury, which is also very important, is that they sent letters to other Reformation cities, to Zurich, Basel, Bern, and Schaffhausen.
Okay.
And other key Reformation cities, Bern being a major one, because Bern is kind of like a protector city of Geneva.
Okay.
And so this is another kind of like stick in the eye to Calvin. It's like, you're not going to control this. We're actually going to write other Reformation cities and see what...
This is just normal standard. It's standard practice. This is not a stick in the eye to Calvin. This is not this, we're putting Calvin in his place. They do this as well. He doesn't mention this. This is standard fare, standard practice. They do this to Balsic, Jerome Balsic as well, when he's being prosecuted for his views on predestination. He's in jail. He's in jail like 3 months for opposing predestination. And they write to the other cities to see what this is just normal standard practice, not stick in the eye to Calvin. And remember, The accusations by Servetus and by Costello and words we find elsewhere is that the trial had its conclusion before these letters were sent out. They knew what they're going to do. That everyone was whipped into a frenzy. They had bloodlust. People didn't show up to sentencing because they saw the trial as rigged. So the people with integrity didn't even weren't invited or didn't want to be involved in this sentencing because it was a rigged trial.
What they want us to do.
Oh.
And so they all wrote back in testimony, almost like a jury,
Like
condemning the doctrine. It's like he has to be dealt with. Not all of them said execution.
Not any of them said execution. You lying piece of garbage, Jonathan Moorhead. Not all of them said execution. Not any of them. Not any of them. No, none of them wanted to publicly state what they might have privately believed because they knew it wouldn't look good. You do not execute for heresy. It was a big no-no. And although a lot of them privately wanted execution, they would not put their signatures on a document that said to execute. So he's lying to his audience. He's lying to his host. Again, he's misrepresenting. His host is left with a misunderstanding of what's going on. You are a liar, Jonathan Moorhead. You're lying. None of them, absolutely none of them said to execute.
But it was kind of like, you know how to deal with such a one, you know. But there was a letter from the pastor of Bern.
So his claim is that not all of them said to execute. A lot of them were worded like, we accept whatever you do. All of them were worded like, we accept your judgments. None of them prescribed execution. This was a trial for heresy. The normal punishment for heresy was banishment. People were offering imprisonment as a potential because, you're going to banish a guy who is transient anyways. People are offering imprisonment as alternatives. Now he's going to say, there's this one guy who wrote Calvin and said to kill him. Yeah, there was a lot of people who wanted to kill him. Yeah, all the Calvin acolytes were of Calvin's same mindset. Calvin wanted to kill him. Calvin is in letters before the trial sentence saying that Servetus should die.
Is his name.
Oh yeah, and then he writes in the letter, the first letter basically in the collection, that he writes his Fred to Farrell. Farrell's garbage. He says, "I'm going to kill him if he ever comes here." That's a quote that we read previously, like. Servetus recently wrote to me and attached to his letter a large volume of his ravings, full of boastful swagger, saying I would see astonishing and hitherto unheard of things. If it pleases me, he says, he'll come here. But I'm unwilling to pledge my word to him, for if he comes and my authority amounts to anything, I'll never permit him to depart alive. Like, he's going to kill him. We have clear intent. He says, if he comes here, I'm going to kill him. And then he comes here, and then he kills him. This is not rocket science. This is not like some mystery that Jonathan Moorhead needs to lead us through.
Who explicitly said if he were in trial in Bern, there's no doubt that our magistrates would burn him on the spot. And so for a city such as Bern that has...
Yep, so that is true. But it's also true that there is another letter in which they express frustration with people in the same city, leaders of that city, who don't want execution of heretics. So there's two letters there. You're mentioning one and not mentioning the other. Yes, there is a letter where he does say that they would execute him on the spot. There's another letter where it says a lot of these people don't want to execute Servetus in this city.
Such an influence over Geneva. I mean, major influence.
Yeah.
That was a signal, you know.
Yeah.
Burn. He's to be burned.
And so is this like are there examinations and cross examinations? How does a trial like this unfold? Because all I have is the American trial system in my mind.
Yeah.
I just see Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson. What's the
Can't handle that.
Yeah, there is a mention somewhere of a secret letter that went out along with their responses. So did the secret letter say, hey, we actually want this person to be executed, which furthers my claims that I'm saying that none of these people, none of these cities, all these letters went out, 8 letters 2 to each city, 1 to the ministers, 1 to the civil magistrates. 0 of them would put their names in writing saying that we should execute. They didn't want their names associated with the execution. They might have sent secret letters and private letters advocating for execution, but they're unwilling to publicly do it because they knew the PR ramifications. So we look at the evidence. Does Jonathan Moorhead have any evidence for his claims? Or is he just lying to us about what these letters say and don't say? And then you look at my claims and say, does the evidence fit what he's saying or what I'm saying? Or neither. Maybe both of us are off our rockers. But it is interesting. Jonathan Moorhead seems to be a pundit. Again, like this whole Servetus affair is not about historically like Calvin doctrine and Calvinism. I think it's more of a character statement about who Jonathan Moorhead is and who modern day Calvinists are who are defending John Calvin in this. This is a statement about their character and what they're willing to do, the lies they're willing to tell, the hoops they're willing to jump through for their cult and their cult image.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough documented evidence to say what it would have been like, but you can read the trial a little bit, what is said by Calvin or someone else, and then what Servetus said in response, and it would just go line by line.
Okay, so Calvin's the main prosecutor.
I don't know if he would say he's a
the host is putting things together. He's like none of this is adding up. He's like, okay, so now you're saying Calvin was doing responses and back and forth, whereas before you represented that Calvin wasn't really part of this. Like, he's just being lied to and gaslit, and he's actually picking up on some of it. This interview is so funny in the amount of lies and misrepresentation that Jonathan Moorhead goes through and misleads his host to this extent. This is funny to watch. Yeah, so Calvin was the accuser. Calvin was not the prosecutor, the government prosecutor, a different guy, but Calvin was the main accuser, the main person talking, the main person trying to condemn Servetus for heresy. He was the theological prosecutor. He was the main person in this trial. Servetus doesn't mention being persecuted by anyone else. Servetus is not talking about some random guy who the state appointed. Like, that's not what's happening at this trial. Jonathan Moorhead's misleading us into the state of the trial.
Prosecutor, he delivered these 38 lines of evidence against him.
Okay.
Wow, let's go look at volume 1. We go just look at the massive amount of material for this trial. Most of it's written by Calvin. Calvin's the main guy going back and forth. When there's the first person being used in these responses, that's Calvin. Calvin writes an entire defense of this thing in his own name. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. He's misrepresented, and that's one of the criticisms that Calvin gets hit with. It's like he's a minister and he's acting as a prosecutor in this case to execute someone for heresy. This is a common criticism of him at that time. Okay,
38 lines are delivered. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of mud slinging towards Calvin, and then what?
Let's go to that real quick. Calvin admits multiple times that he's the one who draws this up. There has to be an accuser. He gets his cook to be the accuser, but the cook doesn't know what the cook's doing. And so he has to write up the accusations. He writes the accusations. Here's the complaint brought by Nicholas Fontaine against Servetus, the 30-some lines. He did not write this. It's all written by Calvin, and Calvin admits to it. And he puts it in someone else's name because that's what Calvin does, because he's a weasel, and he's a coward.
Actually, at that time, representatives from Vienna come up with letters asking for Servetus to be extradited back to Vienna. And even the jailer going and the magistrates, they could have done that, but that probably would have been a hit on their authority in the trial and kind of lowered their name. And so eventually they gave Servetus the option. It's like, do you want to go back to Vienna or do you want to stay here in Geneva? And according to the evidence, that he pleaded with tears to stay in Geneva.
Because
I think he knew he had a better chance to survive. Like he already knew he was burned in effigy. He was going straight to the stake there.
Yeah.
But at least he might have a chance in Geneva. But
again, because Calvin is saying things like, I don't believe in changing people's minds at the point.
Yeah, so all that's true. He's given these two options, and then he picks the one that's more likely to result in his life because he doesn't have a death wish. He does not have a death wish. And so I think Jonathan Moorhead, maybe not here, but somewhere, is like, he told these people, don't send me back to Vienna, do whatever with me what you want, and then he got executed, so really he was asking for it. It's like, it's insane. It's insane. I don't know if it's this part or if it was a part that we kind of skipped over or if it's in the future part, but he does that in this interview somewhere, and I'm just like, you are such a scumbag. It was an either or option, and he picked the option that gave him the best chance of life. It's not a death wish, and it's not him accepting anything that they will do unjustly. He saw himself as being persecuted and persecuted unjustly, and his writings say this over and over. And this is why he's ready to say, hey, the death penalty should be applied in these cases, but it doesn't apply to me. And then why it was so outrageous when it eventually was applied to him. Again, the only guy executed for heresy in Geneva under Calvin. The only guy. So why? He was right. These things don't apply to him. The charges don't apply to him. The laws don't exist to implicate him under. They just don't exist. This is a special case for special reason. It's a private vendetta. It's John Calvin.
One of a sword, but rather through doctrinal persuasion.
yeah, and he continues to try to persuade him to the very end. But
if he would have recanted his positions, he would have lived.
He would have lived, and there's other cases of that.
Okay.
Anti-Trinitarians, and I'll list a few.
And that's one of if you guys get volume 2. We didn't pull it up. Maybe we could take a look at it real quick. There is a very interesting letter, anonymous, because it's a danger to go against Calvin. But it's called a Defense of Servetus. Where did that run off to? Yeah, I don't know if it is Alphonsus Tarraconus, Defense of Servetus, and he just mocks Calvin to no end. It's like, oh man, you guys are so strong. You just killed some random guy that was passing through who wasn't doing anything. You did such a well-rendered service. You preserved the religion with your execution. You're so great and fancy. Now it seems worth the effort to set forth the whole sequence of affairs so everyone may understand the remarkable equity of your procedure. This is not common. This is execution for heresy is not like part of the wind of that century, as these people are saying, that Moorhead's claiming. These guys are being routinely ridiculed, brought to task for these actions. Let's see. Where does he? A lot of this is just very. But while he was in Geneva, covered with cloak and hat, he stood on his feet and carefully listened to the minister preaching. Yet he is recognized and discovered by some people, and on the very day arrested and committed to prison. This is how the matters stand. He rather unhappily arranged his route through Geneva so that he might pass as quickly as possible, and then he's recognized, and then he's arrested. Accusing minister or minister servant, or rather, as most say, the churchman's own cook, approached the magistrate, explaining that the heresiarch, the arch-heretic, Servetus, was present there, who denied the most holy Trinity, called it a three-headed Cerebus, who continually abusive towards Geneva itself and its ministers. Persuading the magistrate and many other things about the man, he requested a guard be given to him, so Servetus might immediately be detained and cannot escape. So yeah, he just goes through this, and he's just ridiculing Calvin for what they did and how they did it. So, worth reading, worth going through. Maybe we'll do it at some other time, but we probably have to close this up. We're almost at like 3 hours. We'll see if he says that thing, and then we'll move on.
A few of them in the book too, that Calvin pleaded with, debated, counseled, that were condemned, but then through more discussion recanted.
Okay.
And so they were not put to death, but they were asked to leave.
Yeah, I remember what my point in pulling that up was, that this guy, he points out that Servetus is arguing in good faith. He truly honestly believes this in his mind, his own teachings. He's not recanting it at death, and they're executing someone who's in good faith trying to argue biblical doctrine. How horrible is that? It's drawing the picture of what's actually happening rather than a Moorhead's framing. They're executing a person who believes in the Bible, who's arguing from the Bible, arguing in good faith, and is not recanting in order to save his own skin because he truly believes this is the biblical doctrine. That's who they're killing.
The city, as far as I remember.
And then as soon as they leave, they're like, take backs.
Well, that actually did happen.
I'm sure, yeah.
And so then they would go to another Reformation city. I think one case is Bern, actually. It was Garibaldi or one of the others. Yeah.
Bern?
Yeah, exactly. And so that one guy was eventually executed in Bern.
Because as soon as he left, he was like, actually, I retract my retraction.
Yeah, and that happens a lot, even with Anabaptists that happened, but eventually it catches up to you.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, and what can we not miss before we get to the execution? What do we need to talk about in the trial?
Yeah, so once the letters come back from the other Reformation cities, I think same day or the next day, the sentence is read in the courtroom, and so then it's just a ticking clock, either the same day or the next day. I think there's one day that he has to stay in prison. Calvin pleads with him again. There's no evidence extant that Calvin was at the execution site. William Farel walked with him to Champel, which is the execution site. So Champel, so if you go to Geneva today, there's the old city, and behind the old city, on the old wall, is the Reformation wall that everybody knows. The major characters, 15 feet tall. 15-minute walk from there is Champel city, that it was the traditional execution site for whatever capital crimes took place. And
is it true that Calvin pleaded to have him executed by the sword rather than by fire?
Yep. And so that's
again, nothing says sword. That's just our own guess.
That is the final piece of evidence to show that Calvin, he didn't control the trial. He didn't control this, that, and the other. And even at the very end, he couldn't even.
Yeah, so Josh says this just means Calvin was a coward. He's going to prosecute but can't stomach or watch the result. So why is Calvin not going to watch the execution? Is it for public perception reasons, because that implicates him even further and doesn't look good, and people could start rumors about it? It's probably political strategy. Could be cowardice. He doesn't want to see the results of his own handiwork. Maybe he's a weak man inherently. I was just listening to a podcast about the zebra murders, where these Nation of Islam types were going around killing white people, and the cop who analyzes who's doing the murder says these people are cowards. All their targets are defenseless people. If you show any sort of muscle, they'll surrender right away and they won't fight. And that's exactly what happened. You're just able to tell by their actions that these people are actual cowards. So maybe Calvin is that type.
Even control the manner of execution. The magistrates wanted to let him know for sure, you're not in control of any of this. You're not going to tell us how we're going to execute our heretic. Mm-hmm. And so that's
Again, this is just him making stuff up. He's pulling it out of his butt. This is not an affront to Calvin or anything like that. Calvin's whipped these people up. He's controlled these people. Calvin, it doesn't talk about how strenuously, if at all, he actually pleaded for these people to mitigate the death penalty. He's just imposing what he wishes to be the case, and trying to explain that as if it were the case. And again, these are all Calvin sources. So Calvin does have a letter, I think it's to Farrell, before the trial, in which he says, hey, I want to mitigate his punishment rather than burning. We went over this the previous podcast. So Calvin was always for death. He was always for not a painful death, just a quick death. He just wanted him to quickly die. And so, and apparently that's a great character mark on Calvin that redeems him and means he was so generous that he wanted to kill him in a more humane method. That's another one of these Calvinist insane arguments.
Calvin was brought very, very low during that trial.
No.
So they walk him out, tie him up.
Yeah, walk him out, and see, there's a lot of apocryphal accounts. Like you can even read that
There's
John
not.
Calvin.
No, there's not. He's lying. Jonathan Moorhead's lying. Okay, so there's three accounts. There's the Farrell account, and Farrell was present, and Farrell walked him to the stake. There's an account that is recorded in fragment that we don't have so a lot of these people recording events that happened. Calvin has a lot of authority. He has a lot of pull, a lot of sway. People can't publish books that are critical of Calvin, so these things start circulating in pamphlet form. And so two pamphlets started circling almost immediately. The first pamphlet was Castillo, who wrote it anonymously, and his history of the death of Servetus. And this is the account where we get people watching Calvin smile as Servetus is led off to death, which Jonathan Moorhead is going to lie to us, and he said that there's accounts of Calvin dancing around the funeral pile, laughing and stuff. He's making it doesn't exist. He's lying. And what he's doing is he's likely confusing the death of Servetus 1553, which is secondhand, being reported by eyewitnesses within the month, within a month or two of the death, circulating the event, people who were there who actually saw it. And then there's this partial lost eyewitness account that we have quoted in an excerpt from a 1727 document about the execution. And this document, the interesting thing is, this document contains the full history of the death of Servetus from Castillo. And it treats both these documents as authoritative. And it seemed to think that the Castillo one, there's too much overlap in information. These are accurate accounts, so they don't publish the full one of this eyewitness account. But they do publish the full one of Castillo's. And they also talk about how, let's see, listen to this phrase. Then John Calvin himself recorded many things about the life, death, doctrines, and character of Servetus in the faithful exposition of the errors of Servetus, which he published after the death of the most unfortunate man. Yet perhaps his narratives should not always be trusted, since they came from Servetus' most bitter adversary. This is a common thing. Like, everyone but the Calvinists are saying, listen, these people lie. These people perhaps don't represent things accurately and honestly, and perhaps we need to take them with a grain of salt. And these are the sources they're allotted and vaulted by people like Jonathan Moorhead. Look at his name again. Okay, but let's go pull up the actual extract where it's quoted. Where is that? Okay, this is just a reference to it. The actual... I gotta find it. It's here somewhere. Where did it run off to? Maybe I accidentally deleted it. I'll have to find it and add it back in. Anyways, it records Servetus. And as Servetus is dying, since Greenwood was used, he makes some sort of statement like, I wish I had money in this life so I could have used it to buy more wood to actually cause myself to be executed faster, because it was a slow, painful death, which is also also recorded in the death of Servetus by Castillo.
Danced around the funeral, not the funeral pyre, the execution pyre.
He's lying,
screaming and laughing. It's like,
Moorhead's a liar.
Propaganda, but
it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. You're a liar, Jonathan Moorhead.
Farrell, walked him. Apparently, the executioner had picked some green wood that caused the burning not to go so quickly. But the apocryphal version of his final words was to Jesus, the Son of the eternal God.
Apocryphal version. He's referring to secondhand accounts that published a month or two after the actual execution by people who interviewed people who were at the execution. That's the apocryphal version. So we don't have an honest person in Jonathan Moorhead. He's a scumbag. All right, so we're going to be cutting there, but we're correcting the experts today because the Calvinists have kind of taken this monopoly over reframing the entire trial of Servetus. And as we see today, they're not beyond just outright lying. A lying when they know better, a lying by misrepresenting, lying by just telling actual just lies, just things that are not true, like he just did. Calvin dancing around the funeral pile. Where is that? You just made it up. You're lying. Talking about, all the Catholics were like, what you gonna do with this heretic? You should be killing heretics. If you don't, you're bad on you. You're lying. So these people are pundits. They're furthering an agenda. Again, I think this is more of a character condemnation against Jonathan Moorhead and Calvinists like him more than it is a historical thing about Calvin. Calvin was a terrible human being. We've seen multiple character sketches of him. You could just look at his writings, how he responds to critics. You could see his temper. You could see his neuroticism, his extreme neuroticism, his extreme self-worth. He's a narcissist. He has a God complex. Anyone who's against him is against God, as we've read today in quotes. And so this is what we're dealing with. Calvin was an actually really bad human being. And so when people defend him, it's like, it makes me wonder about those people. All right. So the second volume is out with all the letters. And so you have access to all the back and forths, mostly from the Calvinist archives, some other letters intermixed with those. All the back and forths about the whole Servetus affair, all these accusations about, you're a Servetus follower, I'm not a Servetus follower, I just think that people shouldn't be executed for opinions. No, you're a Servetus follower, you're trying to defend him because of all these loyalty tests going on with these accusations, these letters, the persecution of people like Castillo, who goes on these quasi-heretic trials for his views of Servetus and the execution of things like that. All right, so all of those things are available, but you could ask questions down below in the comments or start a thread on the God is Open Facebook group. Thank you, everyone, for Calvin was the science. Thank you, everyone, for listening.